Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about the reality he says he witnessed. What kind of stuff would they say?
There are no uninvolved, only unarmed. This is something that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, August 24th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Have a lot to talk about today. A lot of the topics we told you we were going to get to, that we pushed off mostly yesterday. We're going to follow up on what's going on around Maxwell. We're going to discuss the updates on what's going on around Israel, at least as much as we can get to today. But a lot more than that. I put together quite a bit today that I think is really relevant. A lot of it building off the show we did yesterday and the few that we've done recently. The really important one that kind of overlaps the technocratic tiptoe, the one yesterday around the Pronomos Capital and the Teal universe and the funding of all these Freedom City / technocratic hellscapes, the idea of the Smart City, Freedom City overlap, the funding around Prospera and how it all ties together, like on the record ties together. It's quite obvious that I want to build on that today and show a couple more points that I think are very relevant. But like I said, there's quite a bit to talk about today. Well, any given day, as you well know, there always is. And on that note, yesterday, or I aired it today. Oh, actually, technically it was the 22nd, but I aired it today, an interview with Charlie Robinson on that very point. You know, what the hell is happening? We've been calling it because we kind of touch base once a month and discuss how just the crazy 24-hour news cycle and how much can change in 1 month period of time and just get caught up. I always value his opinions. My point being is there's always a lot to cover. But today, we're going to try to get to quite a bit. And I think a lot of times we'll do deep dives on certain topics, but a lot that we're going to talk about today is, multifaceted. You'll see what I mean as we go through it, starting with some important points, I think, just to kind of set the table. We're going to get early into the part about martial law, the discussion around what's happening, and overlap that with what we talked about yesterday, and then the points that are new today, and the alarming reality, the overlap of the Posse Comitatus Act and the conversations around not only giving them lethal arms to enforce the law, both of which, all the different parts of which, every which way this is going, let's put it that way. The only thing that this, legally speaking, they think gives them a pass on this is that it declared an emergency, which then argues that it's within the Constitution, because Congress didn't allow this. And unless if the Constitution allows it or Congress authorizes it, what they're doing is illegal. And so it's pretty obvious that and this is the point of emergency governance, whether it's Obama or Biden or Trump, it's the idea of just declaring emergencies, or every single governor of the country, it seems, and then doing whatever they want as if that's somehow in line with the Constitution. We're going to make some important points on this today to understand that this has been an ongoing point. I framed it an interesting way in the title today, not necessarily even a joke, you understand, because look, it's considered a conspiracy theory. The idea that Obama had plans to roll out martial law, FEMA camps, and all the conversation. I'm not even going to say I don't think so. I know that was not a false story. Now, whether or not all parts of it were true, or whether or not it, changed because of people's awareness of it, which I think is always something to consider, not assume, but consider. The point is that there were elements of that reality that absolutely were real. And if you look at it, which we will briefly today, you'll find shocking overlaps to what's currently happening today. And so I think it's really interesting both to show you the continuity of left and right and not just the government, but also to hopefully reach people who don't want to see that it really is the same idea. Or rather, as I point out, I was talking to someone today, if Biden was doing what you're pointing to, that wouldn't be okay. Whether it was Maxwell, like if Biden was making a deal with Maxwell in any context, you damn well know what the conservatives now cheering it on or gaslighting it would say. Now, that's not to make point about whether right or wrong. It's about hypocrisy and trying to reach those people to show them that this is the same agenda that they were fighting before. But we're going to talk about the overlap in this within the current reality of DC and the other states that it's rolling out to. We're going to talk about the plan that was kind of laid out in regard to the all-encompassing federal control over this, not just involving the Guard, but I guess the IRS, all sorts of different parts of this that are happening in these places, at least in the states in which this is starting to happen. At least that's the way it's being framed, and I'll show you what I mean directly from the people in charge. We're going to go over the Abrego Garcia updates that I wanted you to see, and within that, talk about immigration and all the different horrifying realities. And let's not forget, as I made very clear yesterday, and it's not a secret, it's listed in certain points of, talking points in different interviews, but it's not really made public for most people, I would argue, that this is the immigration agenda. What they're doing in Washington, D.C. is, if not half, almost entirely, depends on who you listen to. And I think the metrics show you a large portion of people they're going after about immigration. It has nothing to do with the reality of DC crime on the regular, just going after people who are, have visas or green cards, but had a traffic stop 3 years ago. That's not what people are pretending is happening. But my point is that this is the same agenda. So it should make you wonder whether either of those narratives are actually what this is. And I think it's obvious that's not what's happening. We're going to go over how Garcia, his story really does make an important point about what's been going on, the rampant lawlessness of the government around this whole story, and the vindictive nature of what they're now doing. And again, some really horrifying stories about U.S. veterans being beat up by ICE or being arrested, or just on and on and on. Everything the people supporting this pretend is not happening, or it's all somehow a Democrat ruse. The truth is, it's very clear. Trump supporters, veterans, people with U.S. citizenship, green cards, visas, or seeking citizenship the right way are all being treated as criminals should they be in the wrong place, the wrong time, and usually with the wrong skin color. I don't think it's even about race at the end of the day, but that is a driving force in this. And if you're ignoring that, then you're lying to yourself. We're also going to talk about, like I said yesterday, the show from yesterday, the Pronomos Capital, and the kind of overarching point around all of that, which is the largely the Washington, D.C. extension, Freedom City, Technocracy. But I want to update some points around that you might have seen. There's a conversation going around in some, I think Glenn Beck did an interview with somebody. I'll shout this out in a minute, in regard to the 50-5 UN agenda. Now, really, this is, we haven't pointed to this document, but this is just a new version of the same things that have been rolling out for a long time. But it is important, and I want you to see this and understand that this is, as it basically ultimately is, I think it's 50 governments in the world within, I think it's 5 years, that's the 50-5, to implement just all digital infrastructure, or in regard to the technocratic, digital ID, digital money, the whole thing. And that's clearly supported by the UN, also clearly supported by the World Economic Forum, who's now run by Larry Fink, who is inside the inner circle of Donald Trump's administration. But that's no big deal, though. We're supposed to ignore all of that. Or the fact that BlackRock is funding Twitter. But, oh my God, we find out BlackRock's involved with Cracker Barrel? Woo, that's a big story. But let's ignore all the BlackRock connections to Rumble, or to, the things that we don't, you get the point. We're going to go over that. And of course, in case you're new to the show, the point is not one or the other. It's all of it should matter. If BlackRock's a problem, BlackRock's a problem on either side. And it's important to see how this all connects, overlapping that with Bill Gates as well, who also is very close to the Trump administration these days, and showing you what they're now doing. It's all part of the same agenda. And it's really shocking how some, there are people that are ignoring it, but some who just seem to not incapable of seeing it. And the different points in this administration of checking the boxes of the 50-5, which is where it's going. And of course, we're going to talk about Epstein, Maxwell, the updates there, and talk about Israel and the ongoing starvation, famine, and genocide. If you haven't seen it by now, and this is not new if you watch this show, seeing as how the IPC had already put out many very clear statements about famine, but they have officially confirmed at a large scale that this is the class 5 famine, not a fringe couple of people, not some kids with deficiencies. No. The legitimate people starving, dying in the streets. We already knew this, though, but it's important to see that it is being engaged with even by the corporate media, as well as the genocide point. Now, look, we don't need to prove. It doesn't matter what's coming out this week, last week, or 4 months from. We were ready to say that 4 months ago. A month into this, if you were honest with yourself, you knew this was genocide. Just like everybody is now very clearly proving, and the data goes back well before October 7th. The point is that even more has come out, and we'll show you very clearly that these things are the reality. But again, my point is, if you're on this show, you probably already know that. But it's important to keep up on what is going on and to what your government's involved in, which is exactly what we're talking about. Whether Trump or Biden or anybody else, they are lockstep with this genocide. And again, if you understand everything else, you'll see how that ties right back into the larger agenda that we're seeing. Some of it's about Israel's Zionist, sociopathic, psychopathic genocide agenda, greater Israel genocide, but it's also about the other parts as well. And so it all interconnects. So that's why the shows from before that I referenced, which I'll include today, you should watch. Let's start today with a couple of quick points that I do want you to see that I think are interesting, just to kind of, again, set the table. Right now, there's a lot going on, right? Epstein story, Maxwell, the extension of it. And despite how clearly they want to pretend it's not there, it is getting worse. And I think this is it's most evident in conservative circles. It's really conflicting for people in this field right now. And my point in showing you these first few points is that it's just a lot about trying to get you to look in other directions. And I want to make a clear connection to this. This is just one of like probably 50 I could have shown you today. But this is random account, hadn't seen before, but has 358,000 followers. This post has 3.9 million views. It was about 2 point something like a day and a half ago. So this is only getting more and more and more reach. You know, most people on this platform would be ecstatic to get 100,000 views. He's gotten 2 million more since the last time I looked at this. Now, the point is, this is a false story, and it's really easy to prove. Doge confirms USAID gave Chelsea Clinton a grant of $82 million through the Clinton Global Initiative, $3 million of which was spent on her wedding, and another $11 million was in a mansion. Now, in any way, am I suggesting that the Clinton family are not criminal? No, they're very much criminals. The Clinton Global Initiative, massive part of it. Chelsea, a huge part of the abuse of that system. My point is that this is a story being put out there. And what we keep seeing in the People's Voice kind of garbage platforms that will take a real thing, like the Clintons are criminals, and that all of them are, pay to play and political manipulations that we all seem to generally know, and then make a fake story on top of that. So when you come in and go, but that's not actually accurate. What, you support the Clintons? No, I didn't say that. But they are hurting the reality of they're counter to the truth. Very important to understand. Now, here's just grok, by the way. No, there's no evidence, but not like it matters in regard. You should look it up for yourself, confirm it for yourself. You'll find that this is not actually accurate. But I think it's important to see that it gets so much reach and continues to get more reach. And it's stories like this that simply make people look anywhere else. And isn't it interesting that the image also is weirdly Epstein and Bondi? Why? I mean, it's almost like it's like Epstein or this story instead, kind of like shuffling people into this. I just think it's everywhere you look right now. And you guys know this. I don't need to inform the audience about this. It's really apparent right now. But this is what I thought was even more interesting. This self-professed, self-proclaimed Mossad agent, Gad Sad, or however you say his name. How is this possible? He says, pointing to a very easily proven fake story, which I'm even willing to bet he probably knows. But you see, this is what their job is. And here are the actual, no, USAID did not do that again. Look it up for yourself. Don't trust grok. But it's very interesting to see. Now, why would a Mossad agent want you to look, and aren't we supposed to believe that they're working with the Clintons? Well, they probably are in many ways. But it's about, look over there. Don't look at the moment that we're currently conducting our agendas. That's my personal opinion. But I think it's very obvious. I'm just showing you this one example. Take it in your mind and look on Twitter, look on Gab, look anywhere else. You'll find this stuff all over the place, which is free speech. They're allowed to do whatever they want in regard to speech and posting, but acknowledge how wild it is and how much engagement it gets with people that want to talk about the truth, to claim they do. Slow News Day. Steve highlights Nick Sorter cheering on what in other contexts he would call socialism if it was Biden doing it. And that's Trump basically strong-arming a 10% stake in Intel. Steve says, so if I have this right, in the last month, Trump has given Palantir the green light for a centralized database on every U.S. citizen, federalized the police force and plans to expand to every major city, nationalized a key segment of industry. Are we winning yet? Team freedom? I don't even need to explain. It's embarrassing that people are pretending like this is in any way what we voted for. He had a mandate. And people just like this. Their job is to cheerlead. That's what it is. But again, if Obama did that, what do you think they would say? That's hypocrisy. Also, yeah, this is the point about the Cracker Barrel thing. DC Drano goes, let it forever be known, Cracker Barrel and the other CEOs have destroyed their careers. Yeah, I don't disagree in regard to like the Gillette thing. Charlie and I talked about this in the last show, in the show I played today. My point, though, is that with all that's going on, you'll find a very weird amount of time focused on things like this. All of them making like 17 tweet threads about how Cracker Barrel and the woke agenda. Yeah, I get it. It's ridiculous, but it's a very small story in the real picture, especially when you understand that it's not even really about the woke ideas. It's about control. But I think it's obvious that this is about looking somewhere else. And I said both sides of the false binary are all out there dutifully supporting the current thing. How very woke of them all of them, left and right. Now we're going to come back to a point, I think, also of DC pointing about a BlackRock connection to these, and we'll make that when we get there. Of course, the one time they want to care, or at least in the context of today, of where BlackRock is invested, but they'll blind themselves to every other example of it when it comes to their team. Now, we also see this kind of stuff. And this is for the podcast, Bolton, the raid of his house and the claim from some unnamed, Jones secret DOJ sources that all tell him there's going to be a massive run, all these grand juries and all these investigations. Here comes the QAnon claims in earnest. Didn't say that, but that's exactly what this represents. Grand juries and military tribunals. And okay, I'm not suggesting that there's not going to, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me with how desperate they seem that they would start throwing people onto the bus to stop where we're all looking. Bolton seems like a possible example. Like that would actually make sense to me because he's a very hated person, but he also kind of knows where the bodies are buried, right? So you wonder if that will, my point is, this is Jones saying the FBI raid on Bolton is part of a much larger DOJ strike force operation to target the deep state. Right, of course, because the deep state's it's only one half of the paradigm. Because it makes sense that an entire structure trying to overtake our government would only focus on part of it, right? Because that makes sense. So stupid to pretend like this is not an obvious, the deep state being used by these people as some kind of generalized term to just point at Democrats. It's just lazy. But overall, I said, who's got the odds on whether this is yet another hyped false story in a long line of hyped false stories that leads nowhere but to the sale of penis pills on InfoWars? As well as we all should, I certainly hope these criminals are arrested. But history suggests that we're being played. So we'll wait and see. But how long do we wait until we start to recognize, if it comes to pass, that nothing ends up happening, that this was a bunch of hype? Does that mean he lied about it? Maybe. Does that mean his sources, who maybe actually exist, are giving him BS? That's also something that's worth considering. This is a clip that I'll play a part of that I think is worth remembering. This goes back a long way.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories.
But you do buy his confidence with true stories?
You buy his confidence and set him up. We've seen this happen recently with Jack Anderson, for example, who has his intelligence sources, and he has also admitted that he's been set up by them. Every fifth.
Now, you get the point. It goes on a little bit longer. The point is simply, he goes, every fifth story was, they give you true stories, and every fifth one was false. That's what the truth and true stories were all to gain your trust. So that one that really mattered was misled. My point is that we have to consider that today, right? And that the idea, I'll come back to this really quickly. I just saw that when I was waiting. The idea that this is just more of that. I mean, look, the history is clear. You can look up whether this platform, which is just this game that he was right game, is so lazy because of how often they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're not occasionally right about things that everyone also saw too, or just other times that they had some insight that we didn't see. But it's just not accurate. And I cover this for a long time now. And not just in general, I mean. But the next point is the same thing. He has the same post that says, huge DOJ actions are coming. And then the next day posts this blank piece of paper. Boom. That's what it says. Who knows? Maybe we're missing some QAnon secret code that we don't recognize. But it says, is that the new Epstein list that Trump released? Good point. But the point overall is that, if we see more coming, I think we should all hope to see people who are criminals get arrested. But do you really think that's happening? Do you think with the dealing with Maxwell, all the different things that have been pulled, the claims, like according to Jones, the war in Ukraine ended a long time ago. According to him, Netanyahu and Trump broke a long time ago. According to him, we should invade Venezuela. Like, these are silly things to understand based on the previous statements of before. Now, quickly before we go forward, every single time, I just happen to see it live. We put this out, and here's what you get. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. I saw this guy break it down, except that guy doesn't do that. This guy is a fake bot advisor, financial advisor on Twitter. This is CHEQ, guys. This is what they allow on this platform, which I always block because they just pop right back up, and they block me, as you can tell, because that's about downgrading your reach on these platforms. There it is, every single day. Anyway, continuing. Now, continuing in just the opening kind of, setting the table points, I think it's important to see that left or right, guys, whatever it is, whether media, mainstream alternative media, or just in Congress, in the executive branch, these people are all doing the same thing all the time. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to frame it as sort of Trump's rolling out Obama's plan, is to put it in your mind that this is the same thing. But here is Brianna Joy Gray saying, I always want to say Greyjoy from Game of Thrones, but knowingly lying to manufacture consent for Biden's genocide and telling the truth only when out of power, which seems to happen often these days, is morally worse than being a true believer. I completely agree with that. Not only does it show, at least if you kept lying, you at least have consistency. At least you have some kind of determination, right? It shows you're just a wishy-washy manipulator, that you're going to be lying for them while you're there and then come out and be like, I was wrong and I knew it and I want to tell you now. You're weak. Not only are you dishonest, not only are you a genocide supporter, you're also too weak to carry that, to continue and back up what you did. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I'm glad they're pointing it out. And look, maybe it is just that they had a moral breakdown and then finally realized they were wrong. I hope that, as much as I think Matt Miller is a disgusting person. The point is that he came out and admitted this now in multiple interviews. Former U.S. State Department spokesman Matt Miller, Netanyahu told us he intends to continue the war for decades and was imposing conditions when we sought a deal. The Israeli government has been obstructing a ceasefire and now setting new demands. It's insane that he can say that publicly and doesn't even influence remotely the current situation. All the same platforms lying, the U.S. government lying about the fact that this Hamas's fault. It's all up to Hamas. How many more things? I mean, that's the thing. The first month of this had enough information to prove to you that we already knew what was going on. And yet we're still a year beyond, and we are still lying to ourselves. Or rather, we're all seeing it and the government doesn't care that we see it. And here's an actual clip. You can listen to it for yourself. It's Matt Miller speaking, and it just says, there was an Israeli pattern we saw for months. Every time we almost reached a deal, Israel looked for ways to add new conditions. Yeah, you heard that if you watched this show, or anybody honest about it. Now, we're not going to go into Israel first, but I wanted to set the table for this is what Trump's administration is doing right now, too. The same thing with a little bit different slant. Usually what Trump is doing I did put off some stuff at the end too about like the potential Russia-Ukraine conversation. You might find out if you look that Lavrov is now saying that the United States is responsible for trying to blow up this deal. That may seem confusing if you only listen to Trump pretending he's trying to be a peacemaker. He's not. Or at the end of the day, at least maybe he does, and his real controllers don't want him to. But if you look at the pattern and look at the left or the right, the government itself, none of them want this to stop. And if they did, they'd stop it right away. So what this seems to me is the continuation of him looking like he's like the outside party, like I'm just helping out, even though he's a central player. The Pentagon also spoke up and said that they aren't allowed to bomb in Russia. It's like, yeah, let's acknowledge this is a U.S. proxy war like it always has been, and Israel as well, because they've been arming the Azov movement for decades. The point, though, it's the same damn thing. They'll gaslight you all day long and then try to gain your favor when they're supposedly the rebel party. Now they're the ones rebel fighting the big power. They're all the same thing. And it's just disgusting. We can't acknowledge that. Now, last point, back to the Intel thing. Howard Lutnick says, big news. United States of America now owns 10% of Intel, one of the great American technologies. Now, quickly, interestingly enough, Intel said in a statement that the government's planned stake in the company would be passive, which I highly doubt that Trump is even going to care, even if that's written in stone. And it says, with no board seats or special governance rights, the government agreed to a vote to simply vote in line with the Intel board and shareholders, except in limited circumstances. That's my point. You give them that loophole, they're going to do whatever they want. But the point is that you're basically feigning to just do whatever Intel wants. I mean, guys, you're just watching this fascistic overlap, and it's not about left versus right. It's not socialism versus it is the government, and it's a willingness to take whatever power it can, wherever it can, while screaming freedom. It's as far back as you want to look. And it's just interesting to me. And the point is not just about that, but what Massey points out, which I agree. Our government should not have ownership in private companies. Yeah, that's something Republicans used to all like everybody who cared about the constitutional reality all agreed with. Right? Or the idea of just the problem of what that presents or creates, like fascism, for example, when corporate entities and government sort of blend together. That's the World Economic Forum. That's where we're going. There are so many specific problems with an arrangement like this, he says, but fundamentally, this is not who we are as a country. James says at some point it becomes necessary when every other government is going to do it. There's the old tired argument today. Well, they did it first, so you're a child and you're just as bad. Okay. Massey says beating communism by employing communism sounds like a great plan. See, this is why they hate him, because he makes them look like what they really are. And I'm not even saying I will always question everybody, but he has very clearly been consistent for quite a while, which is why I point to him. And the reality is, you're supporting communism and you pretend like you're fighting it. It's sad, but I think a lot of conservatives are starting to find out. And it's not just like supporting communism, right? It's about the idea of using whatever they currently can to drive in a point of control. But communism or fascism or Zionism, these are all elements of what we're seeing today. Now, I wrote this out just to remind myself, right? Remember all the times we told you about how the government was shifting toward you? I mean, it goes back a long way. The war on terror turned out it pretty much got aimed at you, but we saw the same thing in the evolution of like the technocratic growth in this country. Whitney and I talked about this many times over the years. Or even during COVID-19, she coined the phrase that your body's the new battlefield. They have turned in toward you, if not always have been. So keeping this in mind in this next segment we're going to talk about. It's important to think about that very point that you are the focal point, right? That you are the worry. Your government is more concerned about what you're doing than anything else they're talking about, because they recognize that we're starting to see that they are not what they claim to be. Whether that means they're not constitutionally in line or they're being ruled by somebody else, people in this country are rapidly starting to recognize this and call it out. So with that in mind, let's talk about the martial law overlap and how things are being aimed at you. This is the last show we did on this. Martial law rolls out around the United States. Maxwell transcript ploy, which, by the way, again, I don't see many people talking about this. See, these are things that I rarely tweet because I talk about on the show, but I'm willing to bet you if somebody just goes out and puts this out there, it's suddenly this. Why are we missing 3 hours of content in the supposed audio? No one wants to talk about that. But tell me why we got 9 hours of conversation and we're told that this is supposed to be about transparency. We cut out parts about 3 hours. You tell me if I'm wrong. I added it all up myself from the transcripts they put out from the DOJ page, and it's like 6 and some change. Not 9. Of course, we can all trust the transcripts, or we can look at the ones Nick Sorter edited so it wouldn't show certain parts, because it's all about transparency. But martial law. Now, going on this point where we are today and kind of we watch that show if you want the up to now, but I'm sure pretty much everybody's aware of what's happening. It's pretty public. But Trump now expands cities targeted for possible military deployment to Baltimore in a spat with governor. I thought it was a good place to start on this point because it shows you, before we even get to Garcia, just the childish, vindictive nature. Is it because Baltimore's ridden with crime? Well, it's got plenty of crime, like a lot of states do, a lot of cities do, but it's definitely not the top of the list. Just like Washington, D.C. doesn't even make the top 30. We showed you the Newsweek breakdown yesterday of the top 30, and they're not even close. The point is that this is an argument he has with this guy, and then suddenly starts suggesting, well, that city's next, just like he keeps doing anywhere. Oh, yeah, you don't like what I'm saying? We have to look into your school and change some funding. It's like that has nothing to do with anything other than your vindictive nature, because they're not blindly supporting you. Now, in another show, I may get into it, but there's apparently a report about Trump's blacklist, which doesn't surprise anybody if you're paying attention, that the idea is that they have a whole list of companies and whether or not they simply pander to whatever Trump wants. And if they do, they get more. Simple. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what every president's ever done, but it's very, very clear in this administration. So this says last week, Trump said he was considering Chicago and New York for troop deployments, similar to what he has unleashed on the nation's capital, where thousands of National Guard and federal law enforcement officers are patrolling the streets. Trump made the threat to Baltimore in a spat with Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat who has criticized Trump's unprecedented flex of federal power aimed at combating crime and homelessness in Washington. Moore last week invited Trump to visit his state to discuss public safety and walk the streets. In a Truth Social post, Trump said Moore asked in a rather nasty and provocative tone, "How dare he?" like you've never done exactly that all the time. And it says, and then raised the specter of repeating the National Guard deployment he made in Los Angeles over the objections of California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. Wes Moore's record on crime is a very bad one. Unless he fudges his figures on crime like many other blue states are doing, I have still yet to see anybody prove that claim. You know, I say every time. If you want to find something that, how do I say it won't be hard to sell me on that. Something that I would easily be like, yes, that's probably the case. Left or right, if you ask me, do you think the government's fudging? Yes, probably, before you even finish the sentence. But whether or not it's proven obviously should matter. But yet Matt Miller or Stephen Miller and the rest of them are just kind of floating these claims because they're all just making the numbers up. Well, then prove that. Prove to me that you can show. Give me a statistic that shows, at least give me some contrast. All we did was wave around some graphs on paper in front of people, and then even those were pulled out and shown to be inaccurate. But the point is, I wouldn't surprise me if they're lying. But the same point is, how do we not know that the Republicans are lying just the same way on their side? As we come out with the numbers of what they claim they're stopping. We've arrested this many and it's taken all these guns. Okay, how do we know that for sure? I'm not saying it certainly could be the case. It wouldn't even surprise me if it was real. But the idea that we're just taking at face value what they say when they've been caught lying about every single thing they've done this entire time, whether it's immigration, whether it's ICE, whether it's court rulings, if you're honest with yourself, you see this too. They've been lying like egregiously more than usual, at least being caught for it, I would say. Trump wrote, as he cited a pejorative nickname he frequently uses for the California governor, because that's typically what they do. Just this very petty and childish way about them where they use fake names to downgrade people. It's about, dehumanization at the end of the day. But if Wes Moore needs help like Gavin Newsom did in LA, I will send in the troops. Right, because that's the response. Military deployment to sweep up some crime, or at least pretend to stop some crime, ultimately roll out the military enforcement, and then, I guess, justify its continued deployment, which is where we're going, which is being done in nearby DC, and quickly clean up crime. The idea that you can argue that somehow, by deploying the military is somehow cleaning up crime. No, pretty sure people are just avoiding the military, right? I mean, it's, yes, you're arresting people, but in what world do you think that this is just vanishing? You know what I mean? Like, so you got a guy who was stealing something. Does that mean the crime? It ultimately comes down to the point is they're going to either rationalize continuing the military deployment because of that very reason, or rationalize some kind of enforcement arm, which is the quick response team they're already talking about. Because if they just remove, then it'll go back to the way it was, which is the point that anybody made who was honest about this. That's the whole rationale, you understand. They're going to justify the never-ending police enforcement, rather military enforcement in this context. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to just see them deployed the way they are now forever, but this is the normalization of this step. And if Obama had done this, I don't even need to say, exactly what they would say, exactly what they've always said, martial law. I think Chicago will be our next, Trump told reporters, and then we'll help with New York, clearly, because everyone thinks they're helping. Now, you realize, despite the narratives, there's, in my opinion, looking in a broad way from left platforms, right platforms, videos you find online, it seems to me that it's pretty split down the middle. You've got people, and largely the insiders, the congressmen, the billionaire, like the people in those areas that are inside the inner circle, and the 1% are the ones going, oh my God, it's so great. Trump's changing everything. It's so safe out here. And then people you talk to are pretty much like, this is crazy. It's unconstitutional. Republicans, Democrats alike. Now, that's not all. There's obviously different parts of it, but that seems to be the majority of what I see. Tell me what you're looking at. Now, this is ABC News from 2 days ago. National Guard in D.C. to carry M17 pistols, which is what we told you in the last show. Conduct law enforcement duties, task force says. Well, we've talked about this, right? Enforcement of the law is where it becomes a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. National Guard troops deployed on the streets of D.C. will now carry weapons for personal protection and are allowed to carry out law enforcement duties. Okay, so what's the rationale here? Okay, didn't they just tell us they cleaned up the crime? Right, so you did it. So now you're increasing the more presence, more weapons? Is it almost as if there's more crime all of a sudden? Like, I don't understand how you can do this, claim the crime is gone, and then deploy more troops. Rationalize more enforcement, more weapons. I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless you realize it wasn't really about the crime. which is where I think everyone's starting to get to. My point is that you're rolling this out, carrying weapons on the idea that you need more defense when, again, your crime is gone. But on top of that, isn't there already a police force? And then there's also less crime, like you just told us. So why would you need these people with weapons? I mean, you guys, it's not that hard to recognize why this is, at the very least, it's not for the reasons they're claiming. That's self-evident. You know why I think it is, but please just recognize the inconsistency, the lazy way they put these things together. The decision is an escalation in Donald Trump's use of military troops to address what he insists is out of control crime in the nation's capital. Right. Again, my point is this is after they tell you so he goes a press conference and he says we removed all the crime. We arrest all these people. The streets are safer than they've ever been. They've said that many times over the last couple of days. You've seen it. Nick Sorter sharing pictures of empty streets going, oh my God, he did it. It's so safe. But now it's out of control. We need more forces. I mean, that's the time frame here. That's pretty weird, isn't it? Really obvious. Trump has mobilized nearly 2,300 National Guard troops from D.C. and 6 states with Republican governors, which is the point. Crossing state lines is, again, I've gone over all of this. And the only reason they claim this is somehow not a crime is because, well, we declared an emergency. That seems to work for the most part because our Congress is completely compromised. And I don't even mean Israel. I just mean that is the case too. But I mean that they just are unwilling to push back. The whole way the check and balance is supposed to work is that Congress, when your executive branch in particular does something illegal, unconstitutional, is that they go, well, you can't do that. And if you persist, then we'll impeach you. They don't do that anymore in any context. And if they even begin it, it becomes some kind of it's a Democrat attack or a Republican attack on the team fighting for freedom. And it just oscillates back and forth. I mean, it is very clear. We talk about this on Fine Points all the time. Now, the argument is to get people involved is what Bruce would say, and I agree with that. But I just worry that we're at a point where that's been so captured that these people, that they don't care what we have to say. I'm not saying don't get involved. I'm just saying we have to think about plenty of other ways to draw awareness to what this is, because this is happening. And they are violating it every which way, declaring emergencies that never go away. Congress is completely a part of it, regardless of the screaming. That's a bad position to be in. But the troops were unarmed until now, which, by the way, is not even true, to be honest. We've seen plenty of examples of both the Marines and the National Guard with weapons in plenty of photographs in LA and here, but, it doesn't matter because it's about setting the narrative. The task force also noted in a statement late Friday that guard troops can carry out law enforcement duties because, here's the point, they're operating under Title 32 status, a law that exempts troops from restrictions under the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act, because they are still technically under the state governor's command. So basically, he's having governors deploy troops as if they're under the governor's command, but then the executive branch is dictating what they do. And they're trying to pretend that's somehow allowed. That means it's not the violation. It is a loophole that was set up for this very purpose that Trump already said in his last administration. I'll come to it next. Legal experts have long warned about how presidents might use Title 32 as a kind of legal loophole to Posse Comitatus. And I'll go over that the law and what that means in a second, which is supposed to prevent the president from using the military as a domestic police force, which is literally what we're watching. Under Title 32, a president pays for a guard mission while keeping troops under control of the governors. In this case, Trump asked red state governors to send their troops to D.C. While those governors technically retain control, which they clearly do not, their missions are being decided by the White House. So that's an oxymoron as far as I'm concerned. They technically are in control, but they literally have no control. The White House is dictating. Or do we believe the governor can step over and circumvent Trump's orders right now? No. So they're not in control. In a visit to the Guard personnel on Thursday, President Trump suggested the military personnel would be playing a larger role in law enforcement. So what that shows me on Thursday, and it is Sunday today, well before they were telling you, they already planned to do this. Okay, so now think about the timing. At that point, they had already been enforcing. They had already been telling you that crime was going away. We already did our job. Thursday, he was already telling them, you're going to be enforcing the law. Okay, now it's Sunday. And their claim it's even worse. And so you see my point. They planned to make more enforcement. They planned to violate this act. They planned to give them weapons at a time when they were telling you it was safer than ever. I don't think this is hard to see. In his visit to the Guard troops on Thursday, Trump suggested the troops could stay for 6 months or longer. Yeah, we're going to be out of there so quick. It's going to happen so fast. How many times did he tell you that? 6 months is not fast. On top of that, it's not going to be 6 months. Mark my words. It's going to be longer. Quote, you do the job on safety and I'll get this place fixed up physically. And we're going to be so proud at the end of 6 months. Well, let's wait and see then. Let's wait and see what it looks like in 6 months. And of course, if it doesn't look good and it's only gotten worse, it's going to be all because of the Democrats. Just watch. Even though it's half true. It's all of them. But what's lazy about this is you already can predict this. We're not psychic. It's just the way it always goes. It's really not even about this at the end of the day, in my opinion. It's going to be about control, enforcement. And then you're going to have protesting because what they're doing is unconstitutional, illegal in a vast sense. And then those people will end up being framed for why everything didn't work. And around we go, and the government gets what it wants. But let's say at the end of the year, he says, this place will be maxed out in terms of beauty. You'll have all new surfaces, all new medians. Everything's going to look beautiful. Weird. It's almost like they're building a new city. It's almost like this is the beginning of a new freedom city or a smart city or a 50-minute city or a prosper or whatever they're, or how about none of that stuff? How about just the idea that you're literally building back better? But it's Trump, though, so it's okay because he's the good guy. Now, 18 U.S. Code 1385, use of Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Space Force. Now, the National Guard come from Army or the Air Force, both of which it seems have been used in this conversation. So just understand this applies. And the posse comitatus, ultimately, as it says here, a posse, we all know what a posse is, right? A grouping of people. And so basically it says, a posse comitatus or otherwise to execute the law. Oh, you know what? I thought this is the wrong one. Well, anyway, the point, let's just do this since I claimed we could bring it up. Give you what the kind of like concise definition is here. Oh, you know what it's going to do? I bet she's going to give me the definition we're looking at here. Oh, no, it does. Okay, good. Oh, no, it just says posse. Anyway, the point was it's basically actually, let's just do this. This will give it to me. So, comitatus, the action of sending a person to an institution, especially prison or psychiatric board or hospital, a burial or corpse. Well, that's interesting. Oh, that says committal. Damn it. Anyway, I wanted to give you the term for this. I've talked about it in the past. Okay, so this is, a war band, a leader. You get the point. I can't find it. The point is simply that the idea is about putting together a posse in like an official sense. That's really what it comes down to. But I wanted to give you the way that they write it down. So my point is that when you have the president, a governor, anybody putting together a group of people, especially when it comes to law enforcement, which is the point of this, right? So the term is used otherwise. This applies to when they're taking military as a posse, grabbing them from multiple states and putting them into DC to execute certain things. That's exactly what this means. Now it says, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitutional Act of Congress, neither of which apply. That's the point. The state of emergency does not somehow change that, especially since it's an illegitimate state of emergency. But it says, whoever willfully uses any part of the Army, Navy, or Marine Corps, Air Force, that's both National Guard included, as a posse comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws, shall be fined under this title and imprisoned. They're executing laws. Now, you go deeper on this. In particular, it has to do with when you're crossing state lines, especially when it comes to the National Guard. There's sort of a loophole within that we've talked about in the past. There's really no way around this. You've heard them, though. We declare an emergency. We can claim that somehow that's now within the Constitution. And that's what they argue. Now, we're going to get into why they argue that. This is the loophole they've tried to create. Now, this is from Technocracy from last year. This is before this. They were already calling this out, saying that clearly they're right. They predicted this was coming. Bring the National Guard's Title 32 status in line with the Constitution. So the point is, the Title 32 status in and of itself is unconstitutional. But so too are tons of other things this government allow. In June 2020, the Trump administration, so just like a lot of these in the previous administration, Trump took the unprecedented position that state governors under Title 32 of the U.S. Code can deploy their National Guard units into other jurisdictions without those jurisdictions' consent. That's the first part, right? So he did it then, and now he's employing it now, almost like they had planned this a long time ago. This radical interpretation of the law threatens state sovereignty and raises serious constitutional concerns. Now, that goes into like California, for example. And no, Gavin Newsom is a monster. And I've talked about that a lot. It doesn't change the reality of the state and states' rights, which is that the idea is that you're not allowed to circumvent that. The idea of the federal government in almost any case circumventing the rule of the governor in regard to the state itself outside of like military deployment and a few other it's We've gone so far beyond that, and we see that every day. And it's not just left, it's not just Trump. It's Biden, it's Obama. The idea that they have just wildly ignored states' rights, whether it comes to cannabis laws or any number of things. I could go on forever. It's a very important point. I mean, in fact, you can go back to the idea of the Civil War, which, in my opinion, was largely around states' rights, not slavery. That was one aspect of it. And that's, and that was one of the reasons it was, it came down to the fight is now, I would point out that others would argue that it was more about the southern states recognizing they were losing control in Congress and wanted to, break off to make sure that they were still powerful. That's a fair point to make. But overall, I think it's kind of the same conversation at the end of the day, right? They recognized they were losing the ability to manage their own locations and they fought back. But people dispute it. Consider it for yourself. So the point is, it also creates a dangerous loophole in the Posse Comitatus Act, right? That's the real point here, is that doing this Title 32 point is like almost exclusively to create the loophole that makes you circumvent this act that would make deploying the military for civilian enforcement a crime. Why are we okay with that? And it says, which prohibits the military from enforcing civilian laws except in situations expressly authorized by the Constitution or Congress, because it means that the president can use the military for law enforcement purposes anywhere in the country, so long as they have one willing governor. The point is that is the loophole they've created. And that's what we're seeing, right? And this was called out before it happened. So it's very clear how this is going forward. Now, here's an interesting overlap. This is from 2012. Obama's plan to seize control of our economy and our lives. Now, you should read this. There's plenty of points that I think are kind of off the path, but the main point, President Obama has made clear that he's determined to continue pushing his progressive agenda, regardless of constitutional limitations, on his power. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? He aims to have his way by issuing more and more executive orders. Whew, that sure sounds familiar. The most ominous sign of possible things to come appear on March 16, 2012, when Obama signed Executive Order 13603 about national defense resources preparedness. Funny how those things are like all these terms, preparedness. Now, the 10-page document is a blueprint for federal takeover of the economy. Now, more than that, but this is how it was framed then. I mean, you could read it. I mean, it's literally what we're watching today. And so my point is, if you read, I'll actually read this next one too. Trump's National Guard plot is an Obama-era conspiracy. Now, as I said before, what they're claiming in this article, I don't think is accurate. Now, there's plenty of points I think you could argue might have been, the typical mainstream alternative media kind of hyperbolic statements or subjective and assumptive claims. But at the end of the day, about the real power shift, I think this is, whether left or right, Trump or Obama or Biden, has been a goal for the government to shift into this kind of authoritarian control. It's not secret. It's very obvious when you look back at their own documentation. But what's interesting is that what we're seeing literally is this. Now, despite this guy framing it as sort of the Obama side was a conspiracy, it's exactly what we're talking about in reverse. He refuses to look at what Obama was actually doing and says that was a fake story. But here's Trump doing that. And the Republicans are going, Trump's not doing that. He's fighting for freedom. Obama was the one trying to do it. It's like this. And they're the ones ruining this country because they refuse to look at the full picture. Here's what it says. During Barack Obama's presidency, conspiracy theorists love to say he would soon declare martial law, which in many ways he borderline did, if not did, in specific locations. Or the idea of things like the Smith Modernization Act, or the idea of being able to detain American citizens indefinitely. Like, these are all variations of the same conversation. Now, it says Wingnuts speculated Obama would use anti-Trump protests as an excuse to march the U.S. military into the streets. According to the wild theories, he'd use the coming riots to cling to power should the Donald win. Some even warned that shadowy brokers would play professional rioters. Isn't that interesting? Believers pointed to abandoned Walmarts along the side highways that would serve as FEMA camps, which, by the way, there's very clear evidence to suggest there is not every single one, but there's point that are not there. There is real plans for stuff like this. We've talked about it. Or fevered internet trolls posted pictures after picture of nondescript military vehicles cruising along Texas highways. Well, guess what? We covered that too, at least in some cases. And you know us, this is not based on some hyperbolic thing. This is a very provable point. There was drone footage. I mean, there was documentation. And the point was, at this random Kellogg factory, I forget exactly where it was. It was in Maryland, interestingly enough, an entire unit of heavily armed UN vehicles already on the U.S. soil in Maryland. Now, there was narratives for why, and maybe that's the case. You can look at it for yourself. The point was, there was this very weird, random spot where they just had this long line of UN vehicles. Here's a Trump post. If Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, look at that. I will send in the feds. Well, it's almost like we've been doing this before. That's his post from 2017. And interesting that we're talking about these same, like my point from the other show, these cities are not the places with the worst crime, like not the top, they all have bad crime, especially some of the places, Chicago, for example. But if you break down the numbers, the way they're going about this is not like the top 5. So how does that make sense? And on top of that, I think the reality of these locations are because they're important to the agenda, whether the AI technocratic rollout or some other variation. I think that's what we're looking at. And I find it very interesting that this stems back to his last administration. I was simply pointing out here all the way back then, this will set a very bad precedent, and I question whether Chicago was made to be chaotic so to justify this controversial step, or at least pushed in the right direction. Official calls for UN peacekeepers to be deployed on the streets of Chicago. That was happening. They were literally calling for the deployment of and that's why it was relevant to this conversation. Anyway, the point was not that every story was true, but that there were parts of this that were worthy of concern. And he's making out to be false. Beige Humvees with new black helicopters. Everything's a conspiracy theory. The Associated Press tweeted out that it had learned Trump was considering the mobilization of 10,000 National Guard troops to enforce immigration policy in 2017, or rather, just the last administration. The fear was that Trump would send American military into the cities to round up people for mass deportation. Sure turned out to be the reality. Very interesting to me. Now, again, a lot to get to. There's more you can read in this. The simple point is that the overarching idea that they're calling out right now was literally what was happening, at least being built. And many of those pieces are what Trump is using today. Handing off the baton, just like Biden did to Trump, or rather Trump did to Biden and Biden did back to Trump with the COVID agenda. It never stops. Now, here is an alarming clip. Trump's DC crime crackdown is extremely successful. Right. So then why are you deploying more troops and why are you giving them weapons? Sure doesn't make sense to me. Now, realize they're not saying that we crack down on the crime and there's plenty more to get. They're going like, look at how empty it is. The crime is gone. At least the grifters online parroting what the people like Miller and the rest are saying. So either you have to admit they're lying to you about that to sell their narrative, or that they're telling you the truth and then explain why they're putting more troops and giving them weapons. But here's the clip. This is from Fox News. And this expands this quite a bit.
Concerns of father and U.S. Army veteran.
I knew I did that. Hold on. I was looking at that earlier. Hold on. I've got that somewhere. And it is right there. Here we go.
The Trump administration's ongoing efforts to combat crime are showing promising results, keeping our capital and its citizens safe.
Oh, one point about this whole thing you're going to see is this effort to like normalize police. How they put like police officers in schools, and over the last decade, it's become normal. That's weird. Same thing here. The idea that this whole video is just these random like B clips of military lounging around the park and military going up the escalator. Why is that? They're just trying to make it look like no, they're just going. They're just part of the world now. It's part of the city. It's how they work. That's the sense I get from it. Yeah, I mean, this making it safe again is not showing a bunch of military roaming the streets. That's just a weird mindset. It's a weird kind of association with safe and military deployment. It still baffles me that Republicans are the ones cheering this on.
Since President Trump announced his initiative, the White House has reported over 700 arrests and 91 illegal guns seized so far.
Okay, so this is what I was saying before. Is that true? Can you prove that? Maybe you can. Maybe there's documents that I couldn't see. I couldn't find it. But my point is that I don't believe, as well as I do, that the vast majority of people that support this, they see the report and they go, oh, we did it, report. Next order takes a clip and shares it online and says, we did it. We're looking at how much we're stopping, without even the smallest amount of due diligence, despite the fact that they've got caught lying about the vast majority of the alleged Doge savings that they also all lied about. Right? Or any number of overlaps on what they're doing in this country and foreign policy, about the deals they're making, on and on, or about the immigration we're going to get to next. Lie after lie. And I don't mean like an opinion, like legitimate, like in their face, proven to be lies, and they all just move forward. Or covering up the Epstein case. My point is they're lying to you all over the place. So why would we just assume those numbers are accurate? I mean, they lied about the immigration numbers in the first place. They lied about everything. So my point is, it wouldn't surprise me. They're doing something, so there's probably people being arrested. I wonder if we'll come to find out those numbers were wildly exaggerated, or that 705 of them were a bunch of random people in the wrong place at the wrong time who barely even broke the law. This is what we're seeing. 300 illegal aliens, of course. This is the real point, I think, largely what they're trying to accomplish. And I think what we all come to find out, a lot of the people they go after are people that they're picked up on because of things they posted online, because they said the wrong thing about the Israel genocide. It's not a joke. We've all seen it from the way they started with Khalil and Ozturk. The most obvious cases of people that were literally not breaking the law and arrested and tried to be deported anyway, both of which they failed. How embarrassing. Garcia is now an example of that we'll get to in a minute. 5 known gang members. Well, seeing as how they keep lying about people they claim are gang members, like another one just got exposed. A Tren de Aragua member we got, and they posted about it at the DHS on Twitter, and then they got proven to be false. He wasn't, like literally proven that he was not part of the gang, that they lied about where he was, that he, on and on and on. Every single day I'm seeing these stories, and it's not something I'm just going, I see on Twitter and I share it. I look it up. We check the source material. We look at the government's own documentation and why they released him. Or the case of the guy they surrounded his house after they opened fire on his car, claiming he was an illegal immigrant and he attacked the cops. And then they finally got to him and then let him go. Why? Because he wasn't an illegal immigrant, because he didn't do anything wrong. We're going to believe that if he ran over cops, they would just let him go because, oh, he's in California. It's aggressive how much they're lying. So 91 firearms seized. Are you okay with that? Shall not be infringed. You realize that what they're saying, like seized illegal guns. What does that mean? What's an illegal gun? I mean, look, if we want to break this down to the real point of whether you even think there should be permits, because that's clearly a violation of the Second Amendment, but I know half the country disagrees. The overarching point is that half these are probably people with marijuana violations or people that don't have, that's not what I believe in. And I'm sure as hell know that most conservatives don't, but they'll just pretend that part of it's not there. Also like Trump saying, take the guns, due process later, or the bump stock ban, or all the very clear unconstitutional Second Amendment things that they all pretend aren't there. But, I could fill a warehouse of things that these people ignore.
With the crime crackdown gaining significant momentum, could we be seeing a shift to cities around the country?
The thing that they all swore wasn't going to happen, and now they're cheering it on.
U.S. Marshal Service Director Gadi Saralta joining us now. Director, thank you for taking time. I think it's really great to hear from you, because as the country has watched these remarkable results, for taking time shift to cities around the country. U.S. Marshal Service Director Gadi driving crime.
I want to make sure U.S. Marshal Service Director. We want to make sure I had the full title.
Down. I myself, a resident of D.C., very glad to see this. I've been there for over 30 years. But I think, it's this sort of whole of federal law enforcement that has brought this, made it possible, not just.
Okay, so if it goes beyond what they've already reported, and this is what they're claiming here, that they're working with every federal aspect of the state, then they're violating this in incredible ways. But my point is that you get these elitist suits going, it's so great what Trump is doing. Look at how great it is that we don't have to bump shoulders with all the peons every day. And then I hear from most people on the ground, including Republicans, that this is insane. People getting accosted on their own steps. People getting tackled because they're filming the cops. It's everywhere. We're going to get into it in a second.
ICE or Border Patrol and now National Guard, but also the Marshal Service. Talk to me about how it's all working.
Go back just a beat, and I'm going to let it play out because I want you to hear all the things you're listing. And he lists a bunch more. Marshal Service, why is this all necessary? To enforce the law. I mean, look, if we're going to pretend this was going to be some kind of gang standoff, well, that didn't happen, right? They just rolled in, arrested some people smoking on their streets, and then just called it a day. So my point is that ultimately, if they're working with Marshal Service and ICE and local police and the Secret Service that have deputized and everybody, it's just what is going? If you don't see by now what this is, again, it's kind of embarrassing, to be honest.
As a unified team, not just ICE or sort of whole of federal law enforcement that has brought this, made it possible, not just ICE or Border Patrol and now National Guard, but also the Marshal Service. Talk to me about how it's all working as a unified team.
So it's a unified command structure. It is led by the United States Marshal Service, and we're very proud of that. But it is a unified command. We have over 20 different federal law enforcement agencies. DEA, FBI, IRS, you name it, you name the federal agency, we got it here. Amtrak, we have.
Okay, so what he's claiming is that the Marshal Service is kind of leading this all in some massive all-federal enforcement of the state, or the city even. Now, there's a whole weird overlap to D.C., which I think is part of what they're using to play this. But now that they're rolling out to other cities, that whole argument goes away. That somehow there's which is the reality of the kind of weird limbo statehood for D.C., and it's the seat of Congress. It's not technically a state. They don't have the voting rights. But the point is, and many people have wanted that to change over the years, that's what allows this kind of murky misunderstanding. But now they're talking about New York and Chicago. There's no way around this. That is insane. You're talking about an all of federal government enforcement and where the states' rights. I mean, you could go on forever in many examples. You talk to anybody who is an expert in the Constitution. This is so far over the top. I mean, this is what we've all warned about for a very long time. So it's so funny to me that the ones who always claim to be the leaders of warning and being ahead of things and predicting everything right are the ones who are pulling punches right now and ignoring this. Let's go invade Venezuela. Freedom, democracy.
Have U.S. Park Police do a great job.
Getty,
so it's a unified thing.
Getty, help me understand how this would work. So the National Guard, the Marshals, these extra forces that we don't normally see in these cities come in and they help get the crime down and then they leave? Or will we see a smaller presence remain? And then the other question I have is, we're hearing, other cities saying maybe Chicago, we should go to Chicago, maybe Baltimore, maybe New York City. So is there enough resources to go around, these extra resources to go around and help in all these cities?
Before he answers, right? They go in and get the crime down. What does that even mean? Right? So what metric do you use to instantaneously prove that crime is down, whatever that means, right? Yes, you stopped some crimes, you claim, you arrested people you claim were criminals. So how do you then go, look how far crime is down? What does that even mean? What metric are you using? Right? Are you real-time surveilling the streets and going, look at, the idea is, yes, you can see that people aren't in the streets, which is weird to me. Why that's a positive note, I don't know. During the day too, by the way, it's very weird. At least on the videos that I've seen. It's of course, I would argue it's during the midst of the massive crackdown. But how do you then argue that crime is just down? Wouldn't you have to wait a month and go look at what the statistics show? Right? This is all I'm trying to show you is they're just telling you what they want you to hear. We'll have to wait to see how this pans out to truly understand the repercussions of what actually happened. But as always, left and right, they're just narrative controllers. These morons and their blow-dried hair and their average, these fake informers sitting there in their suits and green shirt and green dress. I argue that they're so far outside the know, they just are repeating what they're told to this point. And I feel like you can see it. Compare them to propagandists of 20 years ago. And yes, I do argue they were still propagandists, but look at the difference. Look at the way that they presented themselves they very well presented themselves, pretended to be honest and had decorum and they were respected. These people are just clowns today. Why? I think because nobody wants to be there anymore because it's ridiculous and we all see through them. Now, the question, resources, how long will they stay? How can we do this? How can we make this happen is kind of what it felt from her point.
Well, yes, there are agents that and marshals and National Guard from various states that are available. But here, we're here for the period that the president has us here for.
No, see my point? Look at the background, this B-roll image. Yeah, just it's casual, just military going, we're high-fiving with people walking by. Hooray, military. That's what they're doing right there.
And I can tell you it's been extremely successful thus far. We are bringing our intelligence capabilities. We're bringing our investigative assets, our tools. We're working together.
Oh, cool. So now we've got investigations ongoing, right? So now you're talking about federal investigations taking place. This is expanding so far beyond, enforcing instantaneous crime. Remember when I said that? Remember my point was when I got all the pushback from idiots online about the warrantless arrest powers, when I said, well, they're clearly doing far more than just walking down the streets of the billy clubs and forcing people breaking the law. Oh, you crashed a window, going to jail because that's what National Guard's for, right? They're not doing that only. They're investigating. They're carrying out action. They are going after people, profiling them because they have brown skin. All of them. The videos are out there. You can't hide from this. So that clearly expanded this. So then they're going at this as if they don't need warrants for anything. By the way, which we can all prove, ICE is continually ignoring identifying themselves or giving warrants almost in any circumstance. They were trying to force their way into that barbershop on video until they got surrounded and they left because good, they were trying to break the law. But this is my point about these people cheering on authoritarian, unconstitutional action and then claiming they're somehow the MAGA freedom team fighting for the country. It's insane. Or they're just too dumb to know they're wrong.
With the Metropolitan Police Department to deploy in a intelligence-based manner in order to combat crime as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And we've gotten a lot of results. I want you to know we're very proud of the fact that we crossed the triple-digit mark with firearms. You know, we have 101.
You hear that, Republicans? They've seized a whole lot of firearms because that's what you all support, right?
And as of last night, 101 guns. You know, so how many lives did we save with those 101 guns? Who knows?
Yeah, or you could argue how many were lost because they couldn't defend themselves or because they weren't there to fight off lone shooters or whatever. Like, these are just the arguments that you typically hear when Democrats were going after our guns. Funny how this always works out. Now, look, if you're gonna exist in this state of society and then ignore that it violates the Second Amendment to have some kind of limitations on your gun ownership, and you care and you believe that, okay, that's up to you. Then you could argue that yes, in these cases they were breaking the law, but can you prove that? Right? Did you watch them? Did they break them down for you? Like, I'm just saying, we don't get anything verified. They put out numbers on a screen. They claim they've taken a bunch of guns, and you guys are cheering on things that are counterintuitive to what you're always talking about. I just think that's important to point out.
So when you're walking on the ground there and you hear from your men and women who are on the ground there, what is it that is so effective about this strategy, you know, in a real sense, like in a boots on the ground kind of way, that has led to these positive results? Okay, that guy's bad at his job. Funny.
Well, our AG Pamela Bondi and Janine Pirro, the U.S. attorney here, are very tough on crime, right? So what we're doing is we're utilizing the federal statutes to the maximum while we do our investigative work. Now, not all cases go federal. That's unfortunate because...
Okay, remember the question was, how is this effective? You see, that's interesting to me that he just veered hard away from the question. Well, Bondi and them are hard on crime, you know, so obvious. Next question. Okay. I think it's very interesting, you know, when we get to the later conversation that Democrats, and well, probably both sides will happily ignore, which will tell you something, despite how they're supposed to hate Trump and go after him all the time. When we get to that point, when we're going to be talking about effectiveness and whether this had the result they claimed, what do we do with Doge? They lied about it all the time. And then the screamers online backed it up. Now you can look back and prove they lied to you, but we're so far past that. Are we still talking about Epstein? That's where we are every time.
The D.C. Council has a no cash bail that I'm hoping the president and the AG work together to do away, because that is what's happening to D.C., to Metropolitan Police. You know, the cops grab the bad guy, they put him in, and the bad guy comes out the other side, continues their crime spree.
Oh, so you mean you want to stop them from having the legal right to put up bail to come out, even though the judge said it was okay? Yeah, okay, so that's a crime, by the way, like just arbitrarily declaring that people aren't allotted the rights everyone else has because circumstances. These people are criminals, and these are small cases in the larger picture, but understand, what they're doing is to cultivate a very clear picture. Because let's say they arrest somebody for doing something benign, and they just have a number on a screen of 700 evil, mad, rapist criminals, and they just end up going out. Like, these are the things that will show in the long run that they were lying to you. It's all hypothetical. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how the numbers come out. But I find it interesting the way this is being engaged with.
Right.
Yeah, and it also demoralizes the law enforcement as well. I mean, you just, after a certain amount of getting the guy and then they release him, you just go, why am I even doing this?
Right. Exactly.
Lastly, real quick, Director.
Right, because the broad assumption is that they're all evil monsters because you arrested them. You know, like the people that were breaking no laws that you sent to El Salvador, or the many different people you arrest because they have a piece of plant in their pocket. You know, the idea is that we're supposed to blindly accept that. Isn't that, you know, this kind of like bootlicker mentality, right? That we just, I mean, aren't they framing themselves at the moment as the ones fighting the power? I just start self-reflecting here, guys. This is the power.
Sure. So I want to ask you, I saw the White House posted a stat that they've now had 9 consecutive days without a single murder in D.C. Are you hearing from any of the D.C. residents directly, or are your men and women hearing from them that are glad that this is the case?
Right. What a softball, right? Well, if anybody's going to reach out and it's the fact that there's no murder, I'm pretty sure anyone's going to be like, that's good, if that's true. But it's just a funny thing to say. Like, my point is, I'm willing to bet you they haven't contacted anybody. But the narrative's going to be, yes, everyone's telling us it's great. Like Trump says, everyone's contacting me going, please, Trump, do whatever my narrative is today. Don't believe it. He's lying about a lot of stuff. Like, please, Trump, make deals with me. That turned out to be false. The overarching point in regard to the, oh gosh darn it. Sorry, the podcast, I just accidentally put this back too far. Hold on.
That are glad that this is the case?
Yeah, there we go.
Hearing from any of the D.C. residents?
So before I keep playing the point, I just want to get my shot again. The point was about the murder in regard to the claim of how many are normally there. Now, if you look back at past years, I think it was like 4 or 5, which is what they said in the same time frame. And now they've had 10 days without it, which is good, objectively. No murder, good, right? It's not hard to point out. But it's the same point they make with El Salvador. So you roll out military martial law on the streets. You arrest people for doing the most benign of things, so you set a tone. If you're outside, you're going to get accosted. You think criminals who are aware of that are going to go out and conduct crime? No, I mean, this isn't a fake impression. Now, in El Salvador, it's the same kind of thing, except what they did was make deals with the criminals. They literally made a deal with MS-13 in order to effectively make it look like crime went down. And they've suspended civil liberties. They have martial law. Oh, weird. Just like we're doing here, it seems. The point overall is that this is an illusion. Even if they are not that you have the less crime because find the metrics, I'm sure it'll pan out. It's like with COVID-19, right? Everybody was off the street. So suddenly everything's great. No, they just stopped going out. And when this dissipates, people will go back out, which I guarantee will be the rationale for why this doesn't go away. But I just think it's important to think about. Just because no one's on the streets doesn't mean everything's changed.
Directly, or are your men and women hearing from them that are glad that this is the case?
Well, I can tell you, I go out every night, right? I go out every night and I do talk to the residents and the passerbys, and they thank us. We consistently.
Do you believe that? No, look, I'm willing to bet anything you'll find some residents that would probably thank them. But do you actually believe that he goes out every night and talks to people on the street? I flatly don't believe that. These people are so far, they look at you like you're the peons, you're the serfs, right? They are a different species half the time in their mind. So I just think it's funny to me. Now, maybe not him in particular. My point, though, is nonetheless, even if he's not in that elitist 1% upper class, these people don't do that. It's just, you can look in any context. They'll send out a patrolman, right? I just think it's kind of sad that they always want to project that they're just like you. Look, I play the guitar. I'm just like you. And half the time it's not the case. Just my thought.
Here, thank you for being out here. We appreciate you. You guys are doing a great job. Those are all some of the commentary that we hear from the people. Now, interestingly enough, I was at Union Station not too long ago, two or 3 days back, and there was a guy that was yelling at us. And I got enough out of him to find out that he came here from Pennsylvania. So it seems to me like the ones that are complaining are not even from here, and the residents are extremely happy that we're here.
Same point. Is that true? Who knows? Knowing how often they lie, you never. But is it relevant that the person who is unhappy with your unconstitutional actions is somehow from a different state? Pretty sure we all exist under the Constitution, or at least we all agree with the inherent rights of the Constitution, or at least people do. Funny point to make. He doesn't even from here, so it doesn't matter, even though they're currently deploying to multiple states in the country, right? Interesting argument.
Right. So we're these agencies and our agents are doing a great job. I'm very proud to be leading this in this capacity, and we're going to get crime down and stamped away in D.C. here soon.
All right.
Oh, but I thought you said it already did, though. Trump's been circling the ground. Like, we did it. It's over. The crime's gone. It's all down. Look how empty the streets are. You see, the narrative is whatever they need. The moment right there, they want you to know it's happening. We're going to get there. Stick with it. It's going to go on for a long time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe an extension. We'll find out. But we're doing it for you. Then you have massive protests, by the way, of people out there protesting what's going on. Local people who then Stephen Miller. I was talking about Matt Miller. Stephen Miller, I showed you in the last show, calls them a bunch of white hippies, bunch of 90-year-old women that aren't even from here. which how the world he could possibly know that? And secondarily, you can quite literally prove that you have locals out there protesting. And yet all he wants to do is tell the people who have weapons who are now being pointed at them that they're all a bunch of monsters that are manipulating everybody. You know, says the Zionist who wants to destroy this country. I think that's very alarming. Most importantly, because of the idea that this is an all of federal response from IRS down to Amtrak. Very different than what we're being told right now. Now, let's not forget on top of that what we already showed you from the 12th. Pentagon plan would to create a reaction force for civil unrest. Literally, facing protests or other unrest is how the Washington Post frames that. So now apparently protesting is considered unrest, which is what Trump said before. I played it last time. If you protest, you'll be met with violent force or serious force. Well, since I said that, let's make sure we play it to get it correct on the record.
Big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protest that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force.
Very big force.
By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And
now, this is from the last time, right? This is before I think it was the LA point, but it's the same thing. He's literally telling you that you can't protest or we're going to go after you. Now, he also, in an executive order, made it clear, in particular for DC, by the way, in March, because he totally didn't plan to do this in DC, because in March, he literally wrote out for DC that there's exemptions for these, like you can basically argue that certain protests are invalid. It's embarrassing how clear it is if you just care to look at the full picture. This is not some reaction to what's happening. This is a planned out effort. Now, many of them would be okay with that, even though the way they frame it in public says otherwise. But they're okay with that too, because you got to lie because Democrats, you know, it's all rationalized by bad other side, both of them. This is about a reactionary force that won't go away. And it says about 600 troops, probably going to be triple that for all we know, in 2 main locations in the country that get rapidly deployed should there be protests they don't like. Welcome to Trump's America. Or really, the point is, this is aimed at people that need to hear that. The U.S. government. Biden, Trump, Obama, Bush, same damn thing. Of course, next order comes out and says, D.C. now has gone 10 days without a single homicide. Thanks to President Trump. During the same day last period, they had 5. And liberals hate this. And probably just as many ridiculous liberals hate a positive thing if that's what actually happened, just like Republicans hate when Biden does something that looks good or ends up positive, because they're all children, especially people just like him. The point is, I don't believe that's the majority. I don't believe even remotely that most liberals are going, no, I want murder. It's just a dumb way to frame it. They don't like the way you're going about it. And that's the point I want to make. Look, on top of what I said before, if you are rolling out military martial law, if you're just deploying military to enforce law, whatever you want to call it, and you effectively reduce crime or lower murder to 0, it matters how you get there. And he would say the same thing if it was Obama or Biden, and you damn well know it. The point is, you're rolling out martial law on the streets, so people aren't going to be out there. And so you're doing an unconstitutional act. You are violating in foundational parts of this country and then going, look how great it is because of the outcome. Well, you know, we've already talked about that. And we talked about it in the last show as well. The Machiavellian mindset that Trump already referenced with his Napoleon quote, that if I'm saving the country, there is no law I'm breaking. It's all back to the same stuff. It is the Curtis Yarvin, Alex Karp, and really the Curtis Yarvin philosophy, the Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, all of them, Lonsdale, they all have the same mindset, and they are all driving a large part of what we're seeing. In fact, you know my opinion. I think most of this is about this rapid technocratic change out of this country. Nonetheless, you have to recognize that it's just one big manipulation. And you know, for on top of it all, illegal and unconstitutional. True Street Media says this is a flex of unitary executive theory, a consolidation of power in the president via historically illiterate interpretations of our Constitution that we've been building for over a century as we transition back into the very thing our founding fathers sought to avoid. Very well put, and very sad. How many people pretend? This is my point, though, about the Knicks of the world. I don't think they care. They like with Musk or any of the rest, or Stephen Miller. They wear that MAGA badge because they want. It's like that meme of Steve Buscemi with the hat. Hello, fellow kids. You know, that's what they're doing. And they're giving you what you want to see. So you think they're these big leaders, and they clearly don't care about the principle behind it. Trump says it, and it's the good thing no matter what. Fight it. Call it out. No better example than this, because this is so vindictive. Just, I mean, trying desperately. I mean, even at a point when most people are looking elsewhere right now, they're just desperate to make this person pay because they look stupid. That's genuinely what I feel is driving this, if not the larger point about whatever. I mean, I also really do think it's because, and I'll point this out in the article, he knows what happened in El Salvador. Almost everyone that's come back has told you there's rape, torture, horrifying human rights violations it's not by accident. It's the policy. There's a whole breakdown. I read a whole article about this well before this. This is what they're doing. In fact, this is a brief point I'll show you right here. First, this article. Abrego Garcia says Trump administration using threatened deportation to Uganda to coerce him to give a guilty plea. Right. The justice system. The idea is they're simply saying you do what we want and we'll send you to a place where you can be free. But wait, didn't you tell us that he was a criminal, a human trafficking MS-13 terrorist monster, but you're making a deal with him to be free in another country? Sort of like you're making a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell, a human trafficker. You know, they're lying about Garcia, by the way. The point is that we know Maxwell is clearly a criminal, and now they're trying to turn her into the victim and let her go free. Garcia, they're trying to send away to a foreign country, but if he's willing to plead guilty, they're claiming at the very least that they'll send him somewhere where he can go free. I'll read it to you right now. On top of that, if he doesn't plead guilty, well, we're going to send you somewhere where you're going to suffer. Freedom, democracy. Now, of course, all the morons out there that want to scream somehow that these people who don't have constitutional rights fundamentally don't understand the Constitution, which explains why they are cheering on martial law. But as always, if you care to look it up, whether it is a illegal alien, a visa holder, green card holder, or an American citizen, naturalized or otherwise, they have constitutional rights. It is amazing how far we've gone that we can't even understand that fundamental point. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man illegally deported to El Salvador in March and returned in June to face human smuggling charges that he denies. And on top of that, by the way, that the judge had multiple judges, left and right, by the way, despite the claims they make about leaning left judges. Half of this conversation was including the Supreme Court, which is, I think, the majority of conservative judges have leaned in his favor. The point is that the smuggling charges that he said the judge said were I think it was physically impossible or some variation therein, because the numbers they gave would have, and they did this in the court, it would have amounted to him driving 7 days a week, all day long for the whole time, which is just stupid. It's not what actually happened. You can prove it. And so they made up numbers. I argued back then because there was a certain number they probably needed to go to a certain threshold. My point is they lied. They lied about the human trafficking claims because they wanted to kick this further. They wanted them to seem a big bad guy. They lied about the MS-13 charges. They've lied about all of it. All of it has come out in court, but the screaming Republicans who don't care will go with what Trump said on day one. Despite him getting embarrassingly caught screaming at a mainstream journalist that the MS-13 was tattooed on his knuckles, which was just embarrassing because it wasn't. And he wasn't saying the images. He was saying the numbers and the letters were there, as anybody with a brain can see, as he said himself in the interview 2 times. And he's wrong. It's not. And on top of that, experts, left and right, have acknowledged that what was on there didn't mean what they said it did, or that in most cases they don't even use them like that. But all of this is so far beyond us that doesn't matter to people that want to hear what they want to hear. He's accusing the Trump administration of attempting to coerce him into a guilty plea by threatening to redeport him to Uganda. Now, it says attorneys for Abrego said in a Saturday court filing, the Justice Department is pressuring him to accept a guilty plea to 2 felony counts of things he did not do, according to the judges and everything else we've seen so far, promising to deport him to Costa Rica, where he would be free from incarceration. Of course, right? So he's a terrible person that we need to put away right now because he's killing everybody. He's a danger to the country, but we'll set him free as long as you give us the plea that makes it look like we won. Isn't that just insane? These people are so petty and small. It's just insulting. In conjunction with the proposal, the government produced a letter to Mr. Abrego's counsel confirming that he could live freely in that country, which would accept him as a refugee or grant him residency status and promise not to refoul him, weird way they write that, to El Salvador. This is what his lawyers put out. But after Abrego Garcia resisted that proposal, the immigration and ICE officials told his lawyers that they had decided instead to deport him to Uganda. Government officials informed Abrego's lawyers that the Costa Rica option would remain on the table, if he pleads guilty. It's exactly how I just framed it. And the whole point about Uganda is that they do get into is that's the bad side of it, right? You're gonna go to jail or whatever. They go to Costa Rica though. We made a deal for you already. You can be free. It says there can be only one interpretation of these events. The DOJ, the DHS, and ICE are using their collective powers to force Mr. Abrego to choose between a guilty plea, followed by relative safety, or rendition to Uganda, where his safety and liberty would be under threat. That's what his attorneys wrote. And remember, again, guys, the courts thus far, and even the U.S. government has been forced to acknowledge, Rubio and the rest, in court, that they did not have the case they claim they did. But they'll sure as hell scream what they want you to hear in public. Now, it says the allegation by Abrego's lawyers comes a day after Abrego was released from a Tennessee jail, where he had been held since returning to the U.S. in June. Now, remember, his own lawyers petitioned to keep him there for a while, when they could have actually gotten out before what comes next, because they were threatening to deport him. And they had to get some kind of like promises they wouldn't, and they still didn't believe them. Like their own DOJ lawyers said, look, we don't want to do this because we're worried that ICE is going to take him anyway. I mean, these are lawyers that just understand how bad that makes them look. Not, and yet they know the government doesn't care. And so they let him stay. But now eventually they just let him out. And then right after it, because they already promised they weren't going to do this. And then right after he got out, they dumped this in his lap. And now they're letting him decide, apparently. It says he is being instructed to report to a Baltimore ICE field office first thing Monday. That's tomorrow. So in what world you're going to go? Look at what they're doing around the country right now. You're going to go report to ICE. You're going to end up back in El Salvador. They do not care about accountability. The Ugandan government, this is interesting, announced earlier this week that it had reached an agreement with President Trump to accept third country deportees. Yeah, that's still happening, by the way. From the U.S., the African nation's foreign minister said the country will not accept individuals with criminal records and unaccompanied minors. Oops. So how does that work out? So you're trying to tell us that he's a criminal that you're going to send to a foreign country, but they're telling you we won't accept criminals. So really what it breaks down to is they know this person's not guilty. They know what they've been trying to do. And all they're trying to do right now is kind of coerce this into something they can wave around and say, we knew it. He pled guilty. We always told you he was a criminal, monster, terrorist, human trafficking, whatever, like the most hyperbolic thing they can claim. And yet either way you look at this, it's clear that they're acknowledging that's not the case, which is just so embarrassing. Abrego was asking a federal judge in Tennessee to dismiss the criminal case against him, saying the smuggling charges are corrupted by an overtly vindictive drive by the Trump administration to punish him. Last month, Abrego described his experience. Now, I think this is part of this, guys. Even to the point to where they're willing to say, we'll let you go somewhere else, be free. I think that there's a huge problem with what people are divulging about what's happening in El Salvador. And on top of that more and more it's slipping out that Bukele's made a deal with the people they claim they're fighting. And that the U.S. government is a part of that. At least at the very least, Trump's administration is, but I think it's all of it. And I think that's an issue. Like that's already happened with the earlier MS-13 guy that they rushed back to El Salvador because he was about to testify in court in the United States. We talked about that a while ago. And then after that, I think a couple months later, they deported like 13 leaders of MS-13 back. These are people they're working with. It's insane. But Republicans will just flatly deny that, despite how easily you can prove that. Even the U.S. government itself has admitted that case before we got here. Now it says he experienced in El Salvador severe beatings, sleep deprivation, malnutrition, and other forms of torture at the hands of jailers. Now we've had from the barber who was there and plenty of others, rape. He said he was forced to give sexual, but I don't. He was forced to do a sexual act with a guard. I just didn't want to be crude about it. And that's consistent with people well before this overlap with Trump's administration. It goes back a long way. And the point is that he's telling you the same thing. Now, people will dismiss him because he's a human trafficker, even though you can prove that's not true. But the point is that you can prove this. And it says others released from that prison in a recent U.S. brokered exchange between El Salvador and Venezuela have described similar experiences. Administration officials have accused Garcia Abrego of being an MS-13 gang member and a foreign terrorist. Abrego Garcia vehemently denies, and that federal judges have suggested is based on flimsy evidence. I hate the way they said that. They don't suggest that. There's been numerous judges, left and right, who have said this is just ridiculous. Like laugh out loud absurd what you're trying to present as evidence. So that's just a soft play on that. But it says shortly after his release on Friday, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem decried activist liberal judges because that's what they do. Democrat, except for the fact that it was both, right? But it's only the ones that are Democrat that are the ones we're calling out. Now, they want people to think it's only Democrats, and that's why it's not happening. It's a lazy, easy argument, like everything else we're talking about. No Democrat hoax for the Epstein. No Democrats lied about him. No Democrat holdover that we didn't arrest, so we'll pretend like he was actually there. I don't know how anybody's falling for this stuff. It says, we will not stop fighting until this Salvadorian man faces justice as an out of our country. So as long as they get him somewhere else, that's what they're going to claim happened. That's what they're trying to set up right now. A federal grand jury has charged Gregor Garcia with serious federal crimes, a DOJ spokesperson said. In a statement, this defendant can plead guilty and accept responsibility or stand trial in a jury. Don't you love the way they're kind of framing it that he's guilty and we know it? So, but jury, where that would be decided, right? This is, they can face responsibility for a allegation. They just play on the ignorance of average people. That's what they do, which shows you how dishonest they are at their core. State Department is lying about El Salvador. This is from 2025. Now it says, earlier this month, the State Department released its annual county reports on human rights practices. Country reports, which provide nation-by-nation human rights analysis about the previous year. Such reports often reveal political compromises, which in and of itself are disgusting. That right, like make a deal with Israel and we'll downplay how bad you are, which happens every day. But distinct from past years, the department under Marco Rubio has dramatically distorted the human rights records of abusive governments with whom the U.S. has vested interest. Now, here's what's crazy. They do that every time. I've talked about this so many times over the years. They do it with Saudi Arabia. They do it with Somalia. Again, should they make deals with Israel or all of them? It's everywhere you look. And it's not just Israel. It's just any number of overlapping points where they work with them or, they now suddenly how much you want to bet Syria is going to be downgraded, even though it's worse than ever. It's because it's just manipulation. The point is that today with Rubio and Trump, it's worse than even normal. Now it says this includes especially El Salvador, of course, about whom the State Department is frankly lying to the international community. Now, of course, you could do the lazy thing and go, well, it's the Hill, so they're lying, which I would also argue. They lie all the time, like any platform in the mainstream does or mainstream alternative media. But you can also prove this. And I've gone over this from left, from right, from people in El Salvador. It's not hard to see. It says, and this is the person writing this, I serve as an expert witness on country conditions in El Salvador for the United States immigration courts when people are applying for asylum or protection under the Convention Against Torture. To do so, I swear under oath that I am, where was I right there? How did I just lose that? There it is. I swear under oath that I am telling the truth, but in my written reports and orally when called to testify. He's simply just saying, which, that's to me, that doesn't mean much. People can lie regardless of the circumstances. My point is that, but whether or not he has he's under oath, it may make you feel like he might be more honest, but you should question it regardless. That's what I mean. To me, it's about the statement and whether you can prove it, you can investigate it for yourself. And I think you can do both of those things. Now it says the alliance between Trump and El Salvador's president, Bukele, has been very much in the news. El Salvador's sale of space in its prisons to help the U.S. expel immigrants provides a clear motive for the State Department to claim that there's no human rights abuses in these prisons. Yet, this is in direct conflict with reports from human rights organizations, just like every other story they're being told, that refute many of the claims made in the department's reports. In light of new information about its reporting on country conditions in El Salvador, I fear I can no longer rely on the U.S. State Department as a credible source. Well, welcome to the team. Its reports for El Salvador states that there are no credible reports of significant human rights abuses in the country. That's shockingly false. It says, I beg to differ. A long list of human rights organizations like Cristosol, which I think is one local to the country, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights First, Amnesty International, all attest to the same thing. Incarcerated Salvadorians are packed into grossly overcrowded cells, beaten regularly by prison personnel and denied medicines, all easily proven with multiple cases. Inmates are frequently subjected to punishments, including food deprivation, electric shocks. Such systemic abuses have not yet improved. Remember, Bukele is a proud Zionist. Now, that matters to me because of where these connections are and who seems to have embodied this kind of treatment for the other in their society. The leaked reports are consistent with Rubio's recent efforts to have certified El Salvador as taking measures to uphold the law, and self-serving move that also contradicts the facts on the ground. So we're being lied to. I think this is very relevant to point out. Benny Johnson says, breaking, ICE has notified MS-13 terrorist Garcia that he may be deported. It just makes me sad. Like at one point you just get angry, like, oh, he's lying, he's influencing his millions of followers with flatly incorrect information. But it's just sad, isn't it? Like, it's just like, okay, you could say that this person, like at the very least, if you're going to be honest about it, it would be accused. But the way that they just come over the top and just call him an MS-13 terrorist, gang member, rapist, human trafficker, I just don't get why anybody, anywhere, takes these people seriously. You can easily prove this stuff is not the case right now, based on Republican judges too. But they do their job. They come out and they yell the narrative. I mean, I just posted something underneath the DHS account the other day saying you're embarrassing Americans today. It's things like this. Whoever's running this is probably some 16-year-old Doge worker for all I know. I mean, look, I don't have much respect for the government in any case, or any government. But nonetheless, there's usually, you expect some level of decorum because it's embarrassing because people in the world look at us and they put this out on Twitter. It's just, go home. That's it. Go home. It just makes me sad again. Go home. Everything they are today completely contradicts what we tell ourselves this country is. Everything. And immigration was supposed to be like, how long have we talked about Ellis Island and and now suddenly it's like just bad all around. You're not even American, even if you're born here. If you're brown, plenty of them are saying that. Or if you have the wrong ideas, if you wave a Palestinian flag, you're not really American. Like, you guys are the authoritarians. You are literally ushering in the same thing you always claim you're fighting, and it's depressing. Go home. That's it. That's all they posted. Aaron Melnick says, at the end of the day, this below, which I'll read for you, is exactly why Abrego Garcia's case matters, because it shows what this admin does when forced to acknowledge a mistake. Best way to frame that. Lawyers for Garcia who has been released have been informed by ICE that he could now be subject to deportation to Uganda. And he's been told by reports that, as we just read to you for the most part, just trying to skim it, a few parts about this because there's a lot of BS about it. He says, what this confirms is how deeply corrupt and indefensible Trump and Stephen Miller's handling of this has been all throughout. Those of us commenting on this have argued all along that Trump, quote, always, or whatever, he's emphasizing always, had the option to bring him back and proceeding, though lawfully, through lawful channels. We know that now. The whole dog and pony show they put on about how what are we going to bring? We're going to be a human trafficker, Bukele said, to bring him back to the country. And they were always able to. And it says, in other words, after illegally renditioning Abrego Garcia to a Salvadorian gulag, Trump could at any point have brought him back and moved to deport him to a third country, or contested his withholding of removal status, which would have been the legal way to go about this. And he probably would have succeeded. We argued that for months. Now, Trump and Miller left him in El Salvador for months, despite having the option of removing him to another way. That was illegal. It defied the Supreme Court, and it was all because Trump and Miller calculated his opinion, but I agree to some point, that defying the law, they calculated, would thrill MAGA, they frame it, and following the law would deflate it. Now, I don't know if you want to frame it as thrill or just that they would see it as a win. I guess same kind of point. But I don't want it to sound like they're just all like, yeah, some of them are. But the point is that clearly they recognize that if we do this, if we extend this out, even though we're lying, it'll gain us political points. Now, but if we admit it that we were wrong, then we're going to lose political points. And so the law, your rights, none of it matters. It's all about their personal agenda. Nothing different from left or right. And it says, here is how, J.D. Vance basically described the BS, the lie. He laid out the whole lie when they were in that White House meeting and they just lied through their teeth about the whole thing. Everything J.D. said was nonsense. They lied about MS-13 evidence, which we proved to you. The idea that his fate was up to Bukele was a lie. We know that now. And all this valid deportation order idea really meant is that they could have returned him at any time and tempted to removal via unlawful channels. Now they're doing the very same thing that they always could have done rather than leave him in El Salvador. Attempt removal to a third country. This makes the ongoing prosecution of him now for trafficking look pretty suspect. maybe they don't actually think that they can prove that guilt. They know that now. I'm surprised he doesn't. That I can prove that based on what the judge said in front of them in court. That this is again, the paraphrasing was something like, not mathematically, but just impossible. The timing that it would take to do what you said does not add up with what was possible. Now it says the full weight of the Trump White House legal propaganda machine has been bearing down on this one-day laborer and his family for months, all because Trump and Miller decided defying the law would thrill MAGA. No one should accept how the U.S. government has treated this man. An absolute disgrace. Of course, you could make that a partisan point and go, whatever he says bad, because that makes me feel like I'm not on my team. Or you could just be an honest, moral person with principles and recognize that whatever side you feel like it's on, it's wrong. I'm starting to think that this is where more people are starting to get to because of how cartoonish it is today. People are just starting to go, I want a side here. I feel like I'm on this side, but I can't align with the outcome right now. And here are some of these things. Pauly points out a man arrested for documenting police and federal agents in Washington, D.C. last night. Derek Rose says, man arrested for filming cops in D.C. D.C. cop watching is a right, and everyone should be doing it. I will be doing it when he says he'll be doing it when he's in D.C. The simple point is this is happening all over. Now, they're literally telling you that you can't do that. While they don't give warrants, they don't identify themselves, and they're claiming that it's illegal to film them because of some addition that Trump administration put on top of it, some executive order, some mandate, something that's illegal and unconstitutional. Same reason you couldn't just go, well, executive order, you can't have a gun. Executive order, we can bust in your home for no reason. They're doing these things in some ways, but the point is, if it's unconstitutional, it's null and void. That's Mayberry versus Madison. It's just the Constitution. It's the reality. So when they're filming somebody, they can't they could say, what they do, get back up and you can't be this close, which, those are just excuses to get into, whatever, that you're hindering their investigation. The point is that all over the place, you can see people that are filming, and I'll show you some examples right now. And they don't like it because they're breaking the law, and most of them know that. And so if they're filming, I think largely they're worried that might come back to them. But you can just see that he's filming, and they just ultimately tackle him, arrest him, and take him away just because he filmed and wouldn't stop. Here is what they keep doing. I showed you one just the other day of a woman who was standing. Oh, no, excuse me. That was another one. There's the U.S. veteran who was filming them as well. Same thing. And they keep telling him to stop filming them. Now, in the video I showed you, he was just standing there waiting for them to come walking out. One of them ran up behind him and literally, like Supermaned him to the ground. And he hit his head really hard. This was a U.S. veteran. Funny how that matters only when they want it to. Here's another example of ICE literally sneaking up behind a peaceful protester, suddenly rushing and blindsiding and tackling him. Now, there's more context down here that literally shows you they were standing around. Watch this video. This is the vindictive nature that they're literally rolling out. Like, it's the whole rampant lawlessness point. If the administration at the top is not just doing, but praising the most cowardly, small, unconstitutional actions, petty, vindictive kind of stuff, then that's going to bleed into the enforcement arm. I think this is the one. Oh, dang it. How did I not get those? How interesting. Let me make sure I don't have it real quick, then I'll have to download it. Oh, you know what? Maybe. Oh, you know what? That's right. I didn't get this one. That's the one I got next. That's right. Okay. I always do this, and I'll remember when I get there, and then I forget. So I didn't download this one just because there's all the audio was just yelling and screaming. You can just watch it right here. Watch this. I'll read it. It says, ICE sneaks up and tackles him. Agents then literally drag him over the concrete by his arms and legs. Multiple videos show the man in white hoodie just standing there with his hands up. No one's doing anything, the woman yells. What are you doing? The violent arrest occurred outside the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles, California. The point, now, of course, Dems United is all it's going to take for some people to go fake news and ignore it, even though it's easily proven and a fact. That's how the paradigm works, guys. It's the weak-minded are fooled by this stuff. This is what's happening all over the country because they're angry they're being filmed. Look at that. Just so you see it. They're walking up, and they just turn hard to a guy not facing them and literally bull rush him to the ground. I don't care what the reality is here. That's a crime. Look at that. especially since there's people all around that say they were all just protesting. But, again, okay, let's just say this guy broke the law somehow. Is it necessary to run up and literally hit him from behind and potentially crack his head on the ground? Or is it just because you want to make him pay for doing what you told him not to do, which is happening everywhere? Here's an example. ICE detains a husband of a Democratic congressional candidate who is also a disabled U.S. Army veteran. He is a wheelchair bound after suffering severe injury during training in deployment to Iraq. Agents arrested him at his naturalization hearing. He has already got a green card. He's been living in this country legally for 25 years. Now, I believe he was targeted because he is part of Veterans for Peace, which you know exactly what this is about. The overlap here with the protests against the genocide, the protesting against any number of examples of genocidal wars taking place. I'll play the clip for you, and I'll make that case.
Concerns a father and U.S. Army veteran taken into ICE custody in Tukwila Thursday. Zahid Chaudhry is a permanent resident who went to a naturalization hearing in Tukwila and ended up detained by immigration agents. CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is demanding Chaudhry's release. This photo was taken just before the hearing. His wife, Melissa, says Zahid has been trying to get citizenship since 2003. Melissa says he was originally born in Pakistan, is a green card holder, and has lived in the U.S. for 25 years. He also served in the U.S. Army. He was injured during active duty and now is wheelchair bound. His wife is Melissa Chaudhry, who ran for Congress in Washington's 9th District last year. She tells us Zahid has been waiting for this hearing for a while, but...
Now, with what's going on today, are you of the mind that these people, the Stephen Millers of the world, the rest of them, with how clearly they are acting politically, or the cop on the street that goes, liberals already destroyed it, when they say you've destroyed this country, and the response is liberals already did that? Are you of the mind that people wouldn't choose to go after this guy on a list of people with information because he is associated with protest against Israel, or because he's associated with a Democratic lawmaker, or because it's low-hanging fruit, it's vindictive, it's political, and the idea is that he's in the process of getting his naturalization. So what are you arguing? That he's illegal? He's got a green card. I just think it's so far over the top. And on top of that, fought for the U.S. military, which I'm not saying that's something everyone has to respect. But the argument from the side, especially from the Republican side, is that's something that's sacred. Now, my point has always been, if you understand what the military is actually doing in the world, it's the military. I don't think it deserves respect. However, people that go to it believing they're fighting for freedom, even if they're wrong, it's still worthy of pointing out. That's praiseworthy because they believe they were doing something good. Talk to them all when they come back, and they'll give you a different story. But my point is that to go after this man just because of everything else we're seeing, that it's an opening. He's about to become naturalized. Let's get him before he does, because of some claim that he's protesting Israel, or he's doing things that we don't like, or he's pushing back against the government. That's what it comes down to. If you're protesting U.S. wars, you hate the country. Therefore, you're against the country, we'll remove you. Just don't believe. Yeah, it's just sad. It makes me sad, especially today. It is just kind of weighing on me today how depressing it is to see. I don't think it's the majority, but it's far too many people who truly do not understand, either don't care or don't understand that they are the force that's destroying this country. And it's not left or right, guys. It's anybody who is allowing authoritarian structures to get, and we saw it during COVID with the left. We're seeing it right now with the right. If you're aware of all of it and you have principles, start calling this stuff out, everywhere you can, online, anywhere else.
After several hours, she learned he was detained and transported. She tells us an ICE agent refused to tell him why he was being taken into custody. Chaudhry says her husband has a misdemeanor charge out of Australia, but her family never believed it would be an issue.
There you go. Great. So a U.S. veteran who has been here for 20 years, who has a green card, has a violation from another country. They're using whatever they're using. That is not enough, by the way. The idea that you can just remove, it's a privilege. Well, yes, in many cases it is. But once it's given, then they're protected under the law with constitutional rights. By the way, anybody is. The reality, though, is underneath the point of the actual, not the everybody's got rights point, but under the laws that exist within that for a green card and whether or not they can remove it, applies to very specific circumstances. I've already gone over this. You can't just go, you ran a red light, therefore you're out of here. That's illegal. And I can prove that. I've done it many times. This is over the top, especially since it's clearly not all the violent criminals and the rapists and the gang members. That's the vast majority. Like the vast majority of what they've gotten have not been that.
I believe they will do their best to make anybody believe there's a reason. I think the real reason is something they don't want to admit. And that is that his power combined with his principles, he's a very personally charismatic and somewhat politically influential man. They don't want that type of personal power.
I agree.
And that type of principle outside their control. And they especially don't like to see that in a brown man from another country who speaks with an accent.
She describes her husband as someone who is heavily involved with the community, including working with veteran mental health groups.
His favorite way to greet someone is to laugh like the sun and throw his arms out and greet them by name and call them sister or brother and tell them he loves them and ask if they're having fun yet.
Zahid is the father of 2 children under the age of 3. Melissa says she has not told her kids what has happened yet.
I wish I could lie to them enough to be like, Bob has gone away for a while and, try to hide them from the truth of it. But I think they're going to wind up getting a pretty clear picture that Bubba was taken from us. And we don't know when we're going to see him again. I don't think I'm going to be able to hide that. It's too visceral a reality in my soul. I can't keep that from them.
We reached out to ICE to ask why Zahid was taken into custody. We're still waiting to hear back. Once we learn more, we will bring you their response.
Which will never come because they don't care, because they're not accountable to you or anybody else. Right? This is the depressing part of this, Like, it's just sad. Do you think, is that who you think we're going after? They're literally just scooping this guy away. No one's telling you where. Nothing even matters. Somebody who has served this country, at least the military. It's just incredible. The kind of people that cheer this kind of thing on are the people like Laura Loomer. The ones who continue to do somersaults about how they got Gaza amputees turned away from this country. It's just like a vile, disgusting kind of person that leads a lot of followers. And the sad thing is that this doesn't make any sense. He didn't do anything wrong, but because he's brown and because he supports things that are against Israel, they'll manufacture justifications. Democrat people that are pedophiles and rapists and communists and whatever nonsense they scream, which is what they do every time. Always hyperbolic, always, if you support Palestine, you're now a Muslim jihadist terrorist. That's how dumb this gets. And they are literally, in many ways, influencing the Trump administration. How embarrassing for conservatives to see a moron like Laura Loomer literally influencing policy. Just shows you how broken this place is. Here is what he's a part of. Oh, well, you could see there was more too. That was the one that I think stands out to me as the one that probably matters more. But you can see Army Service. These were the awards he's gotten. Army Service Ribbon, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Armed Forces Reserve Medal, Reserve Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Recruitment Achievement Medal, Army Strength Management Award. And then he doesn't break any crimes, and he's going through the right channels to become naturalized, and they go, oh, you've got an old thing from years ago. You're a criminal monster. Get out of here. Meanwhile, they're making deals with human traffickers that can stay here because they want to lie about Garcia, or they're letting MS-13 members go because they have a deal with Bukele. Clearly, we're working with the good guys. You can clearly tell that, right? So here is Veterans for Peace. Stop genocidal wars, right? You can look through this for yourself and recognize the obvious. Calling out Capitol Police arrests and what they're doing is wrong. This guy was a problem for them. He was a politically active person like a Khalil, who they can't allow. Now, overlapping that, just as always, the beginning with El Salvador taught them a lesson. We have to do it secretly. That's all. The lesson isn't don't do the wrong thing. It's that we have to hide it better. That's a government mantra. David Ciorta points out the private jet lobby created a legal loophole for celebrities, which, by the way, is an interesting thing to think about, right? That they've created this way where they're allowed to hide their flights under probably some guys that they'll be followed and tracked and account, which is to some degree probably true. Elon Musk showed that interesting overlap when people simply just showed public information about what he was doing. But they've got a loophole. So if you basically fly private, you can do whatever you want, which usually means they can traffic drugs and they can take people wherever they want. Same thing with diplomats. They live in a different world. They live in the elitist class where they can do what they want. But now ICE is doing the same thing. ICE is using the same loophole with private jets to deport immigrants to people we don't get to follow. How much you want to bet this is happening so much more than we even know? Secret flights going wherever else, and now we don't even hear about it because no one's reporting it. Doesn't that terrify you with how much they've lied about their, I mean, that you can just be disappeared by supposedly this democracy saving the world from monsters? It shows you're not in the place you think you are. Oh, and there's another report of this American citizen who was arrested by the U.S. government. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That I made a mistake. This was a U.S. citizen that was arrested by Israel, who's currently in prison that they've never released. So you're supposed to ignore it. That's the truth. Now, we're going to come back to this later. I will talk about this in the overlap with the Israeli government member that's under Netanyahu that you all know about the story. I'm only going to touch on it at the end because it's been very widely covered, who was allowed to be removed from the country, even though he was part of a child sex sting. They caught him. They took everyone else. They let him take his passport and let him leave, including the two Zionists within our government that allowed that to happen. The point is the tale of two stories here. This American citizen went to visit his family and is currently in a prison in Israel. Have you heard about that from your American citizen government? Have you heard about that from the pro-freedom, pro-democracy, pro-America? No. America first. Where are they right now? This is an American citizen is in prison, who's lost 20 pounds, who's got scabies because he's in the wrong place, because he's the wrong skin color. That's what happens in Israel for an American, and your government doesn't care. Meanwhile, an Israeli child predator comes to this country, gets caught, they let him go. He's currently safe in Israel. He was just doing rounds on the media talking about, he was before, and I'm now doing more. Before, he was talking about the idea of how he's involved with the one taking down most of the things online on Twitter. It's all right in front of you if you care to look. This is just to make the point that we're supposed to not care when an Israeli or a foreign country abducts an American citizen as long as it's Israel. Now, let's talk about the DC point, the martial law rollout. But my point is always in this show is the overlap of that with the technocratic side of things. And I think this is a really important take on not just Pronomos Capital, which is the Teal universe kind of funding of the smart city, Prospera, slave, technocratic world overlap. But the point is that it's not just about the one thing. But the real thing is to see the interconnected point between Prospera and these other really horrifying realities and the medical experimentation they're doing there. And then the same people funding that are the ones funding a totally different thing over here called Freedom Cities. It's the same thing. And what they're now doing with DC and the kind of rumors about Teal, it makes you really start to wonder what's going on. Or if they're all one and the same. Pronomos Capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. Make sure you watch this. I think this is an important show. But building from that, for those that watched it, let's talk about the 50 and 5 point that I think is really interesting. Camus points this out. The global digital gulag is being built right now, and it's called 50 and 5. Now, you could make that same statement for any number of, it's called 2030, it's called the Great Reset. But its point is, it's one of these many things that are rolling out that all point in the same direction. And what I'm going to try to show you is how this interconnects with all the people that are currently tied to, well, not all, but many of the important people that are usually bad guys, but are currently tied to Trump. Like Bill Gates, like Larry Fink. And how all the things they're listing are currently being done by Trump. But again, if you think I'm talking about one side, I'm not. It's the same government. It's Biden, it's Trump, it's Obama, but currently they're in power. And currently, I think it's happening because the largest pushback would have come from people that the people that support him. So like when he rolled out Operation Warp Speed, you carefully, stifled who would have been the most resistant because, well, Trump's doing it. That's how this works. The United Nations Development Program, in partnership with Bill Gates, has officially launched a terrifying new initiative. It says the goal, to strong-arm 50 governments into implementing a full digital public infrastructure on their populations within 5 years. Don't let the boring name fool you. This is the integrated control grid that they've been dreaming about for decades. Digital IDs, biometrics, central bank digital currencies, or stablecoin versions, which are far, far worse. Digital health passports, universal ledger. Here's a clip. My opinions on, I'm not a big fan of hold on. Glenn Beck. I just forgot it all of a sudden, but I'm not, I honestly have a different opinion of him than I do of some of the others, but all of them make me very suspicious for very obvious reasons, at the very least, because they're very partisan. That doesn't mean dishonest necessarily, unless you want to make the clear point that it is dishonest to not talk about something when when it's uncomfortable for your party. But that's at a base level, they all do that. Most partisans do that, where they, slightly distort a story because they want to make it look good for their party, or they ignore something because we all know that. But I think it goes beyond that. But I think just that enough is enough for me to look at these people like they shouldn't, earn your trust very clearly. Any of them, any of us. And if you shouldn't trust anybody in this field, including myself, you should question it for yourself. But my point is that I think we all know they're at a level that is, suspicious. Well, you get the point. So that is important to state, only because I just want you to, that this is the reality of the corporate media side of this and how this is being folded into it. I think is an important thing to think about. Could be that they're suddenly waking up, like Tucker suddenly sees it. I find it hard to believe. Or it could be that they're just trying to, use the obvious to gain your support, which happens all the time. I mean, a good point is to look at Marjorie Taylor Greene with Israel. Now, maybe she sees it. I hope so. But look at how that has worked out for her. That's the point I'm trying to sell everybody on. Make it clear to them that the truth is their most profitable tool. Make it clear to them that opportunism will be supported as long as you're using it for the truth, right? And I only mean that in the instantaneous point. Not that you just support whatever they say going forward, but if they come up today and go, this is the case, and it's right, even if you know they're only doing it because they want to gain your support, you should raise it up and go true. So I think that's a lot of what's happening. I'll come back to that in a minute. But this clip is important. And this, you know what? I'm blank. I forgot. Oh, dang it. I remember, I forgot I was going to grab his name, and I forgot his name all of a sudden. The guy he's talking to. I'll try to find it in the background. If you remember his name, put it in the chat for me. I had it, and I wanted to bring up his account so we could credit him for his statements. But let's watch this clip, and then we'll go over the points I think connects to the larger agenda and this current administration.
Tell me about the 50 and 5 plan.
So the UN has partnered with Bill Gates on this, what they call digital public infrastructure. It's a very fancy term. And I think the simplest way to understand it is they're building a giant digital gulag for all of humanity. So the UN Development Program has officially launched this. It was officially launched at the end of last year, where they're going to get 50 governments, they call them countries, but really they mean governments, to impose at least some major element of this digital public infrastructure on their population within 5 years. So 2028.
Passports.
Digital IDs, and those are already emerging. In fact, many states are developing these. I just went through the airport yesterday. You can scan your digital ID QR code, right? So that's happening.
And that's really one of the main reasons for the COVID
absolutely
nonsense.
The architecture.
Oh my God, Glenn, you're so brave. You finally got there. Good job. Just think about that. It's super brave to come out and say the thing that literally everybody in the world is acknowledged by now. But remember, in the time, they were pulling their punches. Maybe he was just wrong. Or maybe not.
That was laid down is the backbone of this global control grid that they're building. So then you've got the central bank digital currencies, which are already being unveiled. Right? They've already been released. The World Economic Forum just said a few days ago, 98% of the governments and central banks in the world are working on these CBDCs. Once they're fully operational, I guarantee you, they're going to start waging war on cash much more openly. They'll say it's a tool for terrorists, pimps, and every nasty thing, tax cheats, everything you can think of. Then you've got the payment processing systems, and you've also got, we just had the head of the World Health Organization talk about this recently, the digital health certificates, the digital vaccine passports. They're taking what the EU developed during the COVID, which, by the way, the European Commission was promoting vaccine passports in May of 2019, long before anybody ever heard of COVID or anything like that. So they're taking all of this together, and they are using it to build a control system that will not just be able to surveil and monitor everything you do on an unprecedented scale. When you combine it with AI, the ability to make sense of all this data, it's just mind-blowing, but also to manipulate what you do. And so they're talking about this, again, pretty openly. If you look at the World Economic Forum meetings, they talk about the benefits of programmable central bank digital currency, where they will be able to say who can buy what, when, under what conditions. And then the Bank for International Settlements, Carol Quigley, to go back to him for a moment, Bill Clinton's mentor, the guy who really exposed this global agenda to create a one world system. He said the apex of the system was going to be the Bank for International Settlements. This is an institution that's almost entirely unknown to Americans. And what they are working on right now, and this is not a secret, it's not a conspiracy because it's not happening behind closed doors, is what they call a universal blockchain ledger. They want to tokenize every asset in the known universe, every farm, every car, every house, every tree, put it on this ledger, this blockchain ledger, and then you're only able to interact with this blockchain ledger using your biometric digital ID, using your central bank digital currencies. And so if I want to buy something from you, I can't just hand you a $100 bill. I've got to go on my device, connect to this blockchain system, transfer the central bank digital currencies to you. And so this is a mechanism for controlling humanity that I think is really unprecedented in human history. And when you take it all together, it's very obvious.
Right. Katie got the point already. As she said in the chat, such edgy reporting. Am I right? Well, quite literally every single piece of information you heard there has been talked about by Whitney Webb, Derek Brose, myself, most in the IMA for a long time. David Icke, way before that. Jerry Corbett, way before that. So I just, that doesn't mean it's unimportant to point out now. But interesting to see the way these things evolve. And then the way it's sort of framing, like who apparently, it's just, the way these things are cultivated is to get you to think, like, cap off where your information goes, right? So you don't really see the full picture. You kind of build it from here forward, and you get people thinking that we're breaking it down right now. We're at the front lines of breaking, and all you're really doing in many cases we've seen in the past is now that information, like at this point, they've already used what they want from it. Right? Now it's okay that you see the COVID thing was a lie because they've moved into the next thing. Now they're going to use your awareness of that to drive you into the next thing. It's not hard to see. And this is a very clear tactic. And so whether that's the case or not, you can decide. I don't want to always say that somebody saying the thing late is a deceptor, or a deceiver. I don't think that's always the case, but it's worth considering every time. But overall, it's important, right? Not just, everything they listed there is old information, like very much so. But the new 50 and 5 is something that is important to hear. So I'm glad you guys picked up on that. But this is where it goes. Here is the actual plan. This is 50 and 5, implementing digital public infrastructure safely and inclusively. Now, again, every part of what this is, you guys could probably type out in the chat before I even look what every one of these things are. Because you've been watching the show, because you've been looking for yourselves, because it's really obvious to see if you're paying attention. But overall, you can look through it and understand the interconnectivity of it all, interoperability, where you are either a part of it or you're not. And we know what dictates whether you're a part of it, whether you say the right things, you have the right political opinions, whether you buy the right stuff, whether you endorse the right political parties. Like, this is what is being built. And of course, point is, the Gates Foundation, as well as others that we could add, UN, of course. The point, though, is to make this continuing point. That if we know that this is happening, and we know that people that are aggressively, adamant about it are currently involved in the Trump administration, and that should be, like, at least raise some concern, right? At least, conservative or otherwise, you should go, okay, well, maybe that's a problem. Instead of going, well, I know Trump's the right guy, so I don't care. Unless it's, the same situation for a Democrat, then it's the biggest deal in the world. Don't be one of those people. Be honest with yourself. So let's talk about the many different points of this. First, the Bill Gates point, and then I'm going to go through different examples of every checklist we just showed you, the digital ID in one way or another is being rolled out right now in this administration, but also just before that in this country and pretty much every country in the world right now. But as 7Cs points out, Bill Gates is excited to work with Trump. Zuckerberg, excited to work with Trump. General point, all of them. Netanyahu, Trump will speak at Davos WEF meeting, which he did. Trump is working with Larry Fink on economic policy. He is. Trump is appointing George Soros banker to run the Treasury. He is. But I wanted you to hear this clip. Here's Bill Gates. And you already saw this. This is him just telling you how excited he was because of his meeting with Trump. Now, remember, that was about the vaccine direction. And what has happened? Well, they're sprinting in the direction of what he likes, the self-amplifying or trans-amplifying shots. You could look at his own information to find that out for yourself. And he's excited about where it's going. If you think they stopped mRNA, you're not paying attention. You're not watching the show. You're not engaging with the source material. You're listening to Republicans scream. The truth is, you can easily prove that they are very clearly continuing even just regular mRNA COVID shots when it's from Arcturus and Amplitude Therapeutics. Those are continuing. It's on the document everyone's pointing to. And as well as that, they're leaning into self-amplifying shots in all of those directions. On top of that, mRNA in every other field is still continuing. And there's been new mRNA shots for rabies, for dogs. It's just over the top. But this is why Gates was excited, in my opinion.
I had a chance to go have a long and actually quite intriguing dinner with him.
What did you discuss? What was intriguing?
Yeah, and then he arrested him. Deep state going down, right? Or not. Or he said, oh, he's a good guy and he cares. And Clintons are good people. 4D chess, wink, wink. It's going to be 17 years later. We're going to get him. It's just sad what people do. If this guy was going to go to jail for the crimes that he very much did commit, which left or right, you should be able to acknowledge that. Very much this guy's like one of these fake philanthropists that are out there doing horrible things. Then he would have been arrested. Right? Or you can tell yourself they're building some case or it's 4D chess. The truth is, guys, they're working together. And we need to be honest about that. Same with Larry Fink, which we're going to get to.
Well, we touched on a lot of things. It was over 3 hours. To my surprise, it was, just he and I, his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and the person who helps manage things for me, Larry Cohen. So
of course, Susie Wiles, right? The Israel-connected Zionist who's always seemingly gatekeeping around Trump. No big deal.
4 of us sat there, and it was quite wide-ranging. Global health's the area that I work in, and such amazing things have happened and can happen there.
That you work in. It's very, very, very dishonest of you. You're a guy with money that pretends to be an expert because you have money. You don't work in anything other than, it's just funny. It's like claiming that somebody who has a lot of money is an expert in something. He fancies himself as some kind of public health expert. He's really not. He's also not an expert when it comes to computers, but that's a different story.
I spoke a lot about HIV and that the foundation's literally working on a cure for that. We're at an early stage, and so he, in the COVID days, accelerated the vaccine innovation. So I, was asking him if maybe the same kind of thing could be done here, and we both got, I think, pretty excited about that. We talked about polio, where we're very close to getting that done, but if you stop, it'll spread back. And so I explained why it's been tough in Pakistan, Afghanistan. We've had cases show up in Gaza. We have cases in Africa. And he was fascinated to hear what he could do to maximize the chance that during the next 4 years, that incredible milestone will be achieved. I felt like he was, energized and, looking forward to helping to drive innovation. I was frankly impressed with how well he showed a lot of interest in the issues I brought up.
Yeah, there you go. Right? Bill Gates happy with what he's doing. Clinton's praising his direction. It's almost like they're on the same team. But remember, in the vaccine point of it all, every one of those places he listed off, they didn't have outbreaks because they didn't do them. They got outbreaks because it almost directly followed the use of an oral polio vaccine. I mean, that's even Associated Press reported that. So he's just, like, you have to understand, that's Bill Gates willfully deceiving you about what actually happened because that's part of his agenda. Now, you could always pretend it's because, well, they made a mistake, and by admitting it, it's only going to hurt the direction that he believes is good for the world. I don't believe that. But even if you believe that, that still means them being dishonest. So the point is that Bill Gates is clearly in line with Trump's direction, and that's been fleshed out by what they're still doing. It's not hard to see. You think Stargate is something that Bill Gates is unhappy about? So, beyond that, Larry Fink, who's interviewing Bill Gates right here, or the other way around, either way you look at it, the point is that these two are also working together, both of which are very close to Trump's current inner circle. That should matter based on everything we've been told by Republicans up until now. And again, I'm making a point by saying that I do believe that Gates and BlackRock in general are problems for many reasons I've covered many times. In fact, I'll include an article Josh Walkros wrote for TLAV about BlackRock that's a good breakdown. But let's watch this. Camus again. Bill Gates is back, not with a solution for the planet, but with a blueprint for control. He assembled a cartel of the world's most powerful corporations. BlackRock, Microsoft, that's like embarrassingly infiltrated by Israel. We'll show you that in a minute again. GM, Bank of America, under the green banner of his Catalyst Fund. His smooth promises of bringing costs down and helping all countries participate are a smokescreen. Here's what he's really saying. He's creating a public-private monopoly. They will use their influence to funnel billions in government tax credits and recovery funds, your money, into their own chosen projects. They will guide the effort, designing a market that mandates the use of the expensive green products like syn fuels and hydrogen, eliminating the true competition and consumer choice. Now, some of that is the way that Camus sees it. And I actually do agree, but to be clear, part of that is the way he sees it going. There's other ways this could go. Either way, it comes down to the manipulation of it for their benefit, would be the easiest way to put it. And it says, this isn't philanthropy. Now, what's the word? There was a word for that. I don't know if it was Corbett that made it up, but there's a word that it's like for fake philanthropy, or like, I don't know. If you remember that word, give it in the chat. It's a good word. It's like, where they're using philanthropy, but it's really not about philanthropy, or they're using the idea of it to do something else. But it says it's not philanthropy. It's the Great Reset in action. I agree. And it's exactly what's rolling out right now through the U.S. government, just like it was under Biden and before. It's about using the climate agenda to consolidate unprecedented power in the global energy supply. Now, yes, in one case, it's about the climate agenda, but we're clearly seeing the same things justified from the other side of the paradigm. I'd like to believe he sees that, but it says, and ensuring you pay for a system they own and control. Right? Doesn't that sound very similar to like a CEO authoritarian run city run by a dictatorial CEO technocrat like a Thiel or a Mark Andreessen? Yeah, that's exactly it's the different flavor, but the same outcome. This is the ultimate corporate takeover dressed up as salvation. Yeah, I agree.
It's very exciting that we've got 7 founding partners here for Catalyst. These are companies that care about climate, and even beyond getting rid of their own emissions, are helping to support the projects that will reduce the costs of making things like aviation fuel or hydrogen. And so it's not just their emissions that will be impacted here. As we take this over $1 billion in capital we already have, and that's just the start, and fund these projects, we're going to bring the cost down so that all companies and all countries will be able to participate in using green products. So I saw this as a key element. I first went to Satya Nadella. Then, seeing how out in front Larry's been on this issue, I went to him. And so the two of them encouraged me to get a group together. Now we've got 5 other companies who are leaders in this space announcing substantial commitments. So we start with over $1 billion to help fund the scale up projects that will bring the cost down. And there's a lot of leverage here because there'll be government money, government tax credits, that will pull together dozens of these projects.
And you've got, if I understand it, in addition to Microsoft and BlackRock, you've got Bank of America, you've got General Motors, you've got BCG, ArcelorMittal, I may be missing one, American Airlines.
Those are the 7.
Look at Gates' smile, by the way. Also, and clearly I forgot. So it's this guy's interviewing both of them. But it's just funny. Look at the way Gates, look at that. People have always pointed that out. It's just a kind of, like maybe he's just smiling and we see what he is and that's what it looks. But he's got this like evil cat that got the canary kind of a laugh and smile. And it's just weird. Watch him.
Missing one, American Airlines.
Those are the 7 founding partners who are going to help guide this effort. We do expect to bring in lots more companies. We have announced that Catalyst also is working with governments. The EU and the United States announced that they see this effort as very complementary. And so designing these projects well, which if government was doing it by itself, you wouldn't have the breadth of expertise you need. So
Right. That's the rationale for the fascistic overlap, right? The public-private partnership. What we need their expertise, which I don't disagree. The government's bad at everything, but it's interesting that they when they do it together, it's like a perfect scenario where they can not tell you what they won't want to tell you, and the guys the other side won't allow. So when it's a FOIA request, sorry, private company, right? The other way around, it's like, nope, it's the government, it's not us. It's like this. It's very obvious how this plays out, and on top of that, it allows all the things that come along with the incestuous relationship between big corporations and the government.
expertise, the company's expertise with the governments, are taking a lot of recovery money. Europe, has committed a lot of capital. The Congress is debating substantial money in the two different bills there that, if those go through, will allow this effort to go full speed.
Yep, that's what's happening. Now, here are the connections of Donald Trump, Larry BlackRock, and Larry Fink, and then administration of Trump and himself personally. Panama Canal, you already know, we talked about that. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, personally contacted Donald Trump to pitch the deal for BlackRock to acquire two key ports on either. That happened. But he got presented with, and so this, of course, he frames that as something he's accomplishing, but ultimately that's Larry Fink pulling the strings through Trump. Fink's direct involvement with briefings with Trump, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Zionist, and Secretary of Mark Rubio, Zionist, were crucial to finalizing that deal. Did not mention BlackRock by name, of course, when it happened. He called it a large American company, which we caught and called out. I mean, that's very clear why you wouldn't want to mention that, even though most of his team sport players pull the punch anyway. Long-standing personal professional relationship. Yes, that's Larry Fink. Fink and Trump have known each other for 40 years, dating back to their time as young entrepreneurs in Midtown Manhattan's financial subculture. During Trump's first presidency, Fink served as a member of Trump's Strategic Policy Forum. But we pretend like that doesn't matter when even like a handshake from Larry Fink somehow makes every Democrat a pedophile, or whatever you want to claim, even though, again, the understanding of the overlap of anybody in this government with the Epstein thing, for example, all of it, not one side, is important. No, not that everyone on one side or the other is some satanic pedophile, but the reality is clearly that if it matters, if Larry Fink's a bad guy, if BlackRock's a problem, it needs to matter when anybody's associated with it. Well, when XAI and Twitter get funded by BlackRock, that should matter. When Rumble and their highest shareholders are BlackRock and Vanguard, that shouldn't matter. But it gets ignored. Trump also acknowledged Fink's role in managing some of his personal investments during this period, stating in 2017, quote, "Larry did a great job for me. He managed a lot of my money. I have to tell you, he's got me great returns." Great. So if what Republicans say about BlackRock is true, then Trump is benefiting and profiting from those bad and evil things. Funny how that doesn't get brought up. During the coronavirus outbreak, Trump consulted Fink for advice on managing the economic fallout. Right, which they then handed off control of the Treasury to BlackRock, which we did a whole show on this. The COVID coup, the BlackRock takeover of American interests. But that was okay. BlackRock played a significant role in this period, positioning itself as a key player in the crisis response for Trump administration and the Federal Reserve. Trump publicly described Fink as a secret weapon for economic advice during the press conference. Today, rather now in 2025, March 17th, Fink met with Trump at the White House on March 17th, along with Elon Musk, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Michael Waltz. The one that they've now pushed aside because he got caught using a Israeli intelligence app on his phone during secret meetings, like I think most of them do. It's called Telemessage. It was a signal overlap app that was relaying information back to Israel. In fact, of course. Let's do... That's frustrating. Is that the one? That's an important show to watch. Nope. Here's an old one, by the way. Trump signs executive order saying Judaism is now a nationality. No, it's not. New toothless NDA allows Yemen and Iran wars. How funny. Here, now that I got it open, let's do this. And it should pop up. Or was it Signal? Or maybe it was app. There it is. So I had the terms wrong. State Department revealed to be using Israeli intelligence linked chat app involved in Trump admin hack. As I said before, the whole scandal was that he got caught using Signal, but it wasn't Signal. See, this is how the mainstream and mainstream alternative media they pull their punch while they pretend they're going after them. It's a game. It was about the telemessage app that was actually what's the word for it? It archives all the information, and it's literally connected to Israeli intelligence. And they got pushed aside, but they were all using it. So many examples of the infiltration. It's insane. But with Mike Waltz. Larry Fink met with Musk and Trump and Vance and Waltz in a closed-door discussion, which lasted over an hour. This is in March 17th of this year, covered the U.S. economy, financial markets, the Panama Canal deal. This meeting solidified Fink's position within Trump's inner circle. So according to Grok anyway, despite years of tension with the Republican Party over BlackRock's ESG initiatives. Right? So he basically just kind of was like, well, now we're going the Republican way. What does that show you? That they really just care about the outcome, not the narrative that gets them there. So now I'm on your side. So now we'll make it about immigration. Can we keep going forward? All right. Made a strategic pivot to align with Republican priorities. Yeah, because it doesn't matter. It's about the use of it. It's about control. BlackRock's massive financial influence, managing over $11.6 trillion in assets, made it a natural partner for Trump's administration. The point is that $11 trillion, guys, they're controlling the world. I mean, and I don't mean that in some it's sort of hyperbolic. I'm not saying that in like every possible sense, but think about how much money that is. The amount of control over that information, over companies, I mean, that's why it is what it is. BlackRock is literally invested in damn near everything. Damn near, not everything, but it's crazy to look at the portfolio. It's in one way or another connected to almost everything. Some posts on Twitter suggest a deeper connection, speculating that Fink and BlackRock may have influenced Trump's policies. It's not even hype. It's not even up for debate. Yes, that's what happened. Such as an executive order allowing private equity and crypto firms access to pension funds. So reportedly lobbied by BlackRock and Apollo Global Management. Reports indicate Trump invited Fink to Mar-a-Lago in March 2025 to discuss further investment opportunities, suggesting an ongoing relationship. Additionally, during the March 17th White House meeting, Fink and Elon Musk discussed a potential deal between BlackRock and the new AI fund and Musk's XAI, which is exactly what happened, indicating possible future collaboration. See, this is Grok playing we don't have access to the obvious information that everybody knows about, which is that, yes, it didn't maybe come to pass. It already happened, where BlackRock very much did fund XAI. And now XAI, by the way, in case you missed this overlap, became Twitter. Or it already was, is the real point. Son of a gun. When they merged. And the reality is it was always there, right? DARPA XAI program is what Elon is continuing. And he bought Twitter, started XAI, right after that program supposedly ended. Then he sold it to X. So now your AI program is your social media platform, which, by the way, is being funded by BlackRock and is using Israeli intelligence to take your biometrics. All very clear on the record. I'll include all that. As well as that, I'll grab that one too. Because it's still happening. I check this all the time. They're still using Authentics. It is an Israeli intelligence entity. Not hype, not connected. It is. It's wild to me. And the biometrics, of course, it ties back to the bigger point. But the connections of Fink and Gates are all very clear. Here's a post from November 2024. BlackRock's Larry Fink and at least one senior BlackRock executive has been contracted by Trump's team as they search for a Treasury secretary. So this is before he got in power. And what they get him to do? Get the Zionist. Get percent. And this is reported by Fox News. Trump has had a long relationship with Fink, it says, who is one of the best risk managers in the business and has often leaned on him for his views and his marketing, but he's totally not influencing policy. Fink will not be a candidate for Treasury, but it tells you something about Donald Trump, that he is the big tent idea and how to run, basically using the guy. It's obvious they didn't use him because they knew that would be a step too far. This is Insights, mytrade.com. BlackRock's Larry Fink abruptly becomes part of Trump's inner circle. How'd we get there? That was August 2025. You'd think that would matter, wouldn't it? Let's also not forget that Larry Fink is now the chairman of the World Economic Forum, because you'd think that would matter too, but I guess not, because we know it only matters when one side. I made that point many times. I just think it's so wild how clear it is. Now, here's DC Drano. Oh, look, this is on August 22nd. 2 of the 3 largest stockholders in Crackle Barrel are BlackRock and Vanguard. Funny how he cares about that all of a sudden, seeing as how so is Rumble, which he adamantly supports. In fact, let's just make sure, since I haven't looked at it in a minute. Oh, come on. Let's see if that works. That's what used to make it pop up. Here we go. I think this is the one. Is that the right page? Which one was it? Let's see. Let's see if that pops up. I swear it was on this page last time. If that's been removed, that would be hilarious to me. Now I don't. Oh, there it is. Not removed in the sense like they didn't show it. But now look. So now Cantor Fitzgerald is suddenly bumped to the top, which I don't mean isn't even necessarily like could just happen on its own. But before that, it was Vanguard and BlackRock. Rumble Inc. Is that funny? So the exact same point, and yet he's never called out Rumble. Why is that? On top of the fact that we just told you that Rumble, or rather BlackRock, is literally involved with policy for Trump, or more accurately with what we have in front of us, that he's advising Trump. He's involved with Trump's administration. He's on the inner circle, and so is Bill Gates. But it's funny that he only cares about it. Why? Because Cracker Barrel, because that's the current thing. Just like I said before, you just like the left you make fun of, you currently support the current thing, because that's what they all do. And as Brad Miller says, it's rare that DC says something accurate, but he is right. And I don't disagree. I just don't think that it's really about Cracker Barrel. I think that's the easy way to get you to scream about something that nobody cares about when it comes in power. I mean, you think they really care about what they do with the logos, guys? It's so sad that we think these people, I don't mean the average people. I'm not even talking about Congress. There's probably plenty of left-leaning Congress that think this is so great because they're all stupid. But if you think the people who are truly in charge care about you using woke pronouns, I mean, think about that for a second and ask why that even makes sense. The problem is that they will scream about whatever they're supposed to because Mr. Phase 1 Epstein files is not honest. I've been calling out the Rumble thing forever. And again, I'm not even suggesting that means anything other than that they're invested, that Rumble can't control. It's just to point out the hypocrisy of the side. But now to show you all the different things that the 50 and 5 are being checked off right now in this country. We already did a show on this one, Trump's backdoor vaccine passport, which was actually a really important thing that was pointed out by Toby Rogers. And it's funny, I didn't even think about it this way, but we covered the digital health tech ecosystem. This was on July 30th. To bring healthcare into the digital age. Partners like OpenAI, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all the good guys. The point is, it was a backdoor vaccine passport system. It's exactly, I couldn't believe I didn't think of it first. Good, follow Toby Rogers. He does good work. The point is that is very obvious, and it's a part of the problem that they claim they're fighting. But he called it something else, stablecoin, so it's okay, not CBDC. No, it's actually far worse. They're doing this everywhere. Or the private health tracking system, right? For the surveillance part of it, which is already being rolled out. That they all stood up and praised like some amazing thing with all the same points. Or these are all individual examples on top of everything else we've already shown you. Like the SAVE Act, for example, or the many other pushes for digital ID from left and right, including this current administration. Here's one more of them. Surprise, surprise, Derek writes, the Trump administration has found another backdoor to digital IDs. The Treasury is seeking comments on its implementation of digital identities for DeFi. It's just a, death by 1,000 cuts. It's boiling frog. There's many different analogies for it. It's happening. It's got to be honest about it. The massive compilation of all the personal data for surveillance, or this overlaps with the blockchain ledger point. It's all about having the information. Palantir to create vast federal database, data platform, tying together millions of Americans, private records, stock jumps. Or the New York Times article, Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans, and they've really downplayed the severity of it. White House, of course, scraps plans to block those brokers from selling your data, because totally not connected, as they scoop up all your data and then remove the blocks from them being able to profit from that. No big deal. So obvious. Or, of course, the idea that all of it is overlap with Israel when their memorandum of understanding, so Israel has access to all of that data on you. Or the general push into self-amplifying shots. Like all of it. Digital IDs, digital currency, surveillance, ledger, all of it. I mean, the blockchain ledger point, which I didn't actually say anything about it back in the video we were watching. Whitney has talked about that for a long time. And we've personally talked about the gamification, right? Using that blockchain point to, literally track everything. The trees, you know what a part of that is? Nanotechnology. This is all interconnected. But watch this show if you want to understand that Trump admin leans into self-amplifying mRNA under a guise of stopping it. And of course, this is what really gets me. This is James Giordano. I've referenced him many times. Yes, he's part of the government, so, be skeptical. I shouldn't even need to say that anymore. You should know that's inherent, but I'll always do that. No matter whether it's someone you should trust or not, question everybody. But he's a DARPA advisor. Now, actually, Battlescape Brain, I went through this document before, but it's just a clip of what he's discussing, showing you, and I think people have made, put overviews of imagery and so on. It's about the bigger picture. And this is what, at least he's claiming, is what has already been done. And that's what worries me. DARPA advisor admits publicly that Neuralink, that the claim of what they're doing is actually old tech. How long have we talked about that? And that DARPA has officially achieved non-surgical brain control. You know what that, in at least one case that is? That's Charles Lieber. That's Robert Langer. That's the optogenetics, the magnetogenetics. That's what, at least in one part, and they're probably way beyond that now and what we're talking about. Charles Lieber was doing that in 2011 with these virus-sized transistors. It's very clear that at least they're claiming, I'm willing to consider that they're making it up, of course, with question everything, but that they're claiming this has been going on a long time. James Giordano told you during COVID-19, they were already testing this stuff. So recognize where all this goes. And this is interconnected. You cannot have that world they're talking about without this kind of tech advancement. And if you don't understand what that means, go back and watch the other shows, because it's a big topic to get into. But like digital IDs are the connective tissue between the new and the old. They need the digital ID to be able to enforce on everything else. This stuff is necessary for the world they want to build, with the internet of bio-nano things, the bioconvergence that, if you care to look, they're all screaming about.
This is why it becomes so important to understand the novelty and the viability of neuroscience as being leveraged as weapons. We then have the use of nanoparticulate agents, aerosolizable nanomaterials that can be breathed in and disrupt blood flow or neurological network activity, that can be used as an in-close weapon, or perhaps that can be used as a more broad weapon of disruption and or destruction. We also have the capability to utilize nanomaterials to get electrodes into a head and to create a vast array of viable sensors and transmitters. This is DARPA's N-cubed program, next generation non-invasive neuromodulation, utilizing these techniques and technologies to create vast arrays of implantable electrodes that need not be put into the brain surgically.
Now, we've talked about the N-cubed, N3 program many times. I'll give you the documents again. Whitney's article for TLAV about coronavirus brings up, what's it called? Coronavirus gives a dangerous boost to DARPA's darkest agenda. That's where she pointed those very same things out. It's been there for a long time, and it is literally part of what is happening. Like COVID-19, the overlapping tech, it's all part of the same stuff.
That are then able to read from the brain and write into the brain remotely in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a rapid pace. The prizes are big, economically, in terms of power as well. But there are risks and hazards. Yeah, there are conventions that are out there, but the question then arises, are these conventions not just necessary, but are they sufficient? These international signatory treaties have suggested that no, they're not. They're really not keeping their finger on the pulse of the rapid development of brain sciences, not only within the United States and its allied nations, but internationally. And sometimes in programs that utilize commercial veiling to be able to then hide behind in terms of what's being made available to make their military intelligence personnel better and to develop a whole arsenal of weapons.
One of the examples of that is what we're seeing right now. The overlap with the companies like Palantir, the companies like BlackRock and Bill Gates, like that's what we're talking about. They use that as a shield so you can't actually see what's fully happening. And
both kinetically and non-kinetically, that can then decrement the performance of competitors and adversaries.
This is the article I was referencing. Coronavirus gives a dangerous boost to DARPA's darkest agendas. And we've gone over all of this. And this, again, it's crazy how far ahead this was in the conversation. This was May 2020. And she was talking about general DARPA programs, the in vivo nano platforms. That even goes beyond the shot point. That's to the argument of, and this is DARPA's program, of building the mRNA platform, but in your body, which arguably is what they were trying to achieve and is now part of what they're doing with this whole platform and everything else. Then the living foundries. Same kind of overlap, a much bigger conversation, programming the fundamental metabolic processes of the biological systems, and the next generation non-surgical neurotechnology. That's the N3N³ program. Gone over all of this. An injection of a virus carrying light-sensitive sensors or other chemical biotech or self-assembled nanobots that can reach individual neurons and control their activity independently without damaging sensitive tissue. This wasn't some hypothetical. This was from DARPA documentation. That's directly from their program. The proposed use for these technologies isn't yet well specified, but as animal experiments have shown, controlling the activity of a single neurons at multiple points is sufficient to program artificial memories of fear, desire, experiences directly into the brain. You want to know where that comes from? 2019. It's amazing. Here's the larger report from 2020. Neuro team advances to phase 2 of DARPA Cube program. So explain this to me. So phase 2, meaning there's ongoing phases in 2020. I wonder what phase 3 looked like. Guess they didn't tell us about it. Maybe it already happened. Bioconvergence, the next big thing from Israel. Now, they're just one part of this. But it's always important to recognize that there is it's not just this belligerent thing committing a genocide. There's very much more going on around this bigger picture. I recommend you read this. It's an important article that's been relevant every day since she wrote it. (2020). So this is an important overlap with Epstein. Also a clip from Whitney Webb. Insight into why Israel has a leash on Trump. That's sense receptor saying that in their opinion. But I agree. And I agree the overlap, it's not just Epstein, it's not even just, it's the bigger picture that I've mentioned, a lot of us have talked about, the idea of how Trump essentially got bailed out by bankers. And ultimately, even on the record, suggested that he was more valuable to them in that capacity than losing him, going bankrupt. Like his name was important. And so the argument is that he's been compromised ever since. But you can listen to her explain it.
Early 90s, Trump's Atlantic City holdings and other things drag down his business empire, and he declares bankruptcy. And in order to be bailed out, he's bailed out by Wilbur Ross, who he later rewards for that when he's president the first time, making him Commerce Secretary. But at the time, Wilbur Ross was representing the Rothschild banking interests. In the Rothschild banking interest, specifically this Wall Street M&A arm that they opened up in the 80s, was responsible for bringing Robert Maxwell to New York. So basically, Trump as a business icon would not have existed beyond the early 1990s if it wasn't for the Rothschild banking interests. Who have a lot of affiliations to people in sort of the Epstein network, and specifically Epstein's financial crimes, which include a lot of currency speculation in this, what the New York Times once called a currency speculation cabal, including people like Jamie Goldsmith, also backed by the Rothschilds, and even George Soros, whose first his quantum fund in like the late 60s was bankrolled by the French Rothschild interests. And for anyone that's familiar, the Rothschild family has a very long and storied history with Zionism and the establishment of the state of Israel, and being a major patron of that.
I mean, don't forget, Lord Rothschild was the one who literally wrote the Balfour Declaration letter that we can read online right now. But it goes much, much beyond that. But that's just important to remember for those that have literally seen that and how denied all this stuff is in the mainstream conversation.
So, they've definitely had a lot of influence, I would think, over Trump now, since he owes them a lot. And also,
I think that's important to consider. Here is conservative girl saying Trump is absolutely pathetic. This is just unforgivable. It's a slap in the face to all the girls who were trafficked and abused. Anyone making excuses for this is still as reprehensible. I'm seeing a lot of conservatives, whether they call that in their name or not, they're very clear. I mean, high-level people like Tucker Carlson, who calls this out. This is Trump again, knowing what was about, like we're going to get into a little bit more about what didn't happen or is going to be called out. He called it a hoax again. The whole thing is a hoax, he said many times, despite Jones and the rest trying to give you a narrative for him and claim, no, here's what he meant. He meant that they altered some of it. Therefore, he can't, it's a hoax because they lied about the part they wanted. No, he keeps saying the whole thing, the list, the whole thing is a hoax over and over. I mean, it just becomes embarrassing to keep screaming that it's not what he keeps saying because we know what their job is.
Justice Department is also sending some of the Epstein files over to the House Oversight Committee today. Are you in support of them releasing all of them?
Keeping it open.
If they wanted to release,
people shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. I couldn't care less. You got a lot of people that could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like you don't think we know what you're doing, Trump. There could be, I don't know, a hypothetical person out there that might be in there that's totally not guilty. Like, oh my God. Does anybody coach this guy anymore? We used to be under the mind that there's like just political people all around. They're like, don't wear this, say that. He just seems he shoots himself in the foot every day these days. It's wild to me. That is very lazy and obvious. The House committee point, though, it already came out, which I'll show you next. Apparently only 3% of what they gave them is something new. Everything else was already released. And they knew that. You must understand that. So he's trying to get ahead of what he knew would be bad reporting that said they didn't give anything new. And the way you do that is going, get ready for Democrats to lie about everything. And so when the narrative comes out, or the truth that they didn't give you anything new, the DC trainers are going to go Democrats. When in reality, they didn't give you anything new. And Trump is already trying to set the table with maybe people being there that aren't supposed to be. It's just pretty obvious.
If they wanted to release,
people shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. I couldn't care less. You got a lot of people that it could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be. People, because he knew everybody in Palm Beach.
Wow.
I don't know anything about that, but I have said to Pam and everybody else.
I don't know anything about that. What does that even mean? See, he does this and it gives it away. So you're saying there could be people in there that shouldn't be in there, but I don't know anything about that. You mean the hypothetical thing that you just said could be? Like you're exposing your own hand when you do things like that. This is why it's becoming, that anybody who's honest about this must be able to sense that. Watch it again.
If they wanted to release,
people shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. I couldn't care less. You got a lot of people that it could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be. People, because he knew everybody in Palm Beach. I don't know anything about that, but I have said to Pam and everybody else, give them everything you can give them, because it's a Democrat hoax. It's just a hoax. The whole Epstein thing is a Democrat hoax.
The whole Epstein thing. You got. At some point, you just got to listen to what he's saying. Yeah, that's what all the team sport politics players are trying to convince you that what he means is that it's real. But for the Democrat stuff that they put in stuff about Trump, even though he keeps telling you that you already know. It's the whole lazy story. These kind of arguments are only necessary for the few people that might just not have seen this or might still, that most people I think already know how kind of uncomfortable this is.
So we had the greatest 6 months, 7 months in the history of the presidency.
Right, of course. Whatever it is. Next 6 months will also be the greatest in history, even if it's less.
And the Democrats don't know what to do, so they keep bringing up that stuff. But
so it's only Democrats, not your entire base who clearly keeps pointing this out. Or the ones who, even like a cat turd, for example, people are calling him out every day because he's got 75 tweets over 5 days that are like, release the Epstein files. As long as they come out, it's going to matter. Everyone has to care about this all the time. And then the moment it goes, well, who cares? Only Democrat stuff. That shows you who they are.
Affected them. Bill Clinton was on his plane and went to the island supposedly 28 times. I don't want to bring that up.
Except you literally just did. Am I crazy or is he getting really bad at this? Worse than I've ever seen.
Frankly, you have Larry, whatever his name is, Summers, the head of Harvard, who was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend.
Yeah, who is it? What Larry? What now? I don't even know him. What's his name? Sorry, it's not working.
Nobody ever talks about that. But I don't want to hurt Larry Summers. But he was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. No.
But the one you didn't know his name a second ago. But now you know about him. That's funny.
This is a Democratic hoax to try and get the significance of what we've done over the past 7 months. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They say it's #1 in history. What we've done.
I'm sorry. I just can't. That's so dumb. Everything about this whole thing, that clip is going to go down for me as one of the worst examples I've ever seen from, a president in general, but him in particular. That's just insane. He's stumbling over his own statements. He says, what's that guy? I don't even know. But now we know him, but I knew him from Clinton. It's just bad. It shows you that either he's guilty or he's very afraid of what people will frame his association as, that we all already know. You already know he's on there. You already know he's on the flight logs, whether he didn't go to the island or not, which you can't prove. We already know he's got 1,000 pictures with Epstein. You already know Epstein on the record said he was my closest friend for 10 years. You already know all of this. It's really hard to watch right now. But I agree. Anyone still making excuses is sad. And the idea is that you're claiming that it's only a bunch of fringe people. You guys were the ones that largely set up this momentum. Conservative Girl also says the Trump administration is crumbling. Those of you who praise him when he is failing massively need to realize how bad it is. The rest of us see it for what it is, a complete betrayal. He chose Israel over America. It's sad to think how legendary it could have been. Now, look, I guarantee there are people pretending to be, that's what the team sport will say. She's not really a Republican, because in their minds, Republicans will always side with the team, even if they're being lied to. The point, though, overall, I know far more conservatives today that are, in many cases, would still vote for Trump again. If you ask them point blank, I've done that, but are right now saying exactly that. He's siding for Israel. He's hiding the Epstein list. And even then I would still pick him over Kamala, because that's how deep the brainwashing goes. But it's there. Adam says, friendly reminder that more people have been arrested for anti-Semitism than for raping children with Epstein. Important as well. Remember how that all came together. Now, here's Nick's order, showing you how the team sport politics action is here. Ghislaine Maxwell confirms she never witnessed Trump doing anything inappropriate. The leftist narrative is in shambles. Right, because, it's usually important to completely blindly lean into what a sex trafficker says. Doesn't that seem a little counterintuitive, Nick? Right? The convicted sexual trafficking monster that we've all been calling out just promised Trump's a good guy. So it's a clear endorsement. We're winning, right? Because that matters, right? The sex trafficker likes Trump, so he's a good guy, clearly. Look, I'm not going to say because she said that, therefore he's bad. That would be the same stupid subjective argument. But it's just wild to see stuff like that. The left narrative. And again, it's not just lefty people that are calling this out. You can almost feel the desperation on people like this. And then on top of that, it turns out that he edited what he posted. Now this verse says, laugh out loud, that you guys are taking the word of a convicted pedophile sex trafficker who has every incentive to suck up to Trump because she wants a pardon. You people are such clowns. I agree. But, just as much clownish as what the left does in the same circumstance. But Gen X girl caught him. Why did Nick Sorter edit Ghislaine Maxwell's transcript to spread a narrative that is not accurate? He cut lines, and you could look for yourself. She has it all posted, screenshotted. Cut lines from page 106. Cut lines from the bottom of page 107. Merged them together. Omitted lines that prove Maxwell lied, such as never seeing Trump at Epstein's house. Again, I did this myself. You can prove in very basic ways that she's saying things that are some of the most known parts of the story. She's rewriting the history, which we're going to get to, that is outraging the victims' families and the victims themselves, the same people that they all claimed they were fighting for. But he did this in order to hide the part that hurt what he wanted you to think. I'm telling you guys, I've been calling this guy out since he got caught lying in Lahaina. When he went to Lahaina and used the money people gave him to swear he's going to stay in a tent and cover this, and got a 5-star hotel, and then went there and did not do what he claimed. Despite what people want to claim about his amazing coverage, he was part of the whole blue lasers and all the garbage. Overall, he got called out by the people that gave him that money and almost cried on air, by the way. I covered it on the show. The point is that I can see that these people are out there trying to use what you care about to convince you of things that are against your interests. Fox, or at the very least, whatever is benefiting him in the moment, whatever you want to look at it. Fox News aired the voice recording from Maxwell where you can hear her repeat the exact lines from the bottom of page 107, which includes her false claim that she never met Trump at the Epstein's house, part of Sorter omitted. Why it's important. In 2003, the New Yorker published The Dish on Dinner on page 3 that featured Jeffrey Epstein's East Side townhouse dinner with barely clad models organized by Maxwell. Epstein's guest, Donald Trump, Leslie Wessner, Clinton aide, Doug Band. Putting aside the fact that it's asinine to claim a convicted pedophile who's seeking a pardon is credible, the transcript clearly shows she lied. And these influencers on social media seem to be running interference to help pedo Maxwell and Trump. She embedded posts for the details. I mean, guys, you could look at it's very clear. You can simply look at the real picture and then go back and look at the thing he posted. Oh, I just had it open. I mean, it's self-evident. He literally cut this, right? I mean, that's really crazy to me that he thinks that, I mean, this is how dumb he thinks you people are, that you could just will fall for whatever he puts out. That needs to be called out. That's shockingly dishonest. Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out and says, Maxwell says President Trump was never inappropriate with anybody, even though that's not what she said. And I find it dishonest they're even framing it like that, which is that she said, in my presence, when I was around. That's what she said. That does not mean he never did anything inappropriate. But even Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'll say it again, the Democrats tried to put Trump in jail for the rest of his life. But what actually happened? You could always pretend it's because they beat him and they didn't have a case. The reality is, all the narrative aside, whether it's Clinton or Trump or anybody else, you get a big show and nobody ever goes to jail. That's the most consistent thing of this conversation. So yeah, they went after him, destroyed him. Multiple tried to kill him all these times. Did he? I mean, even the one from Butler is widely disputed, but all the rest of them, like I never even really both the other claims were random. Some guy like 3 football fields away, they claim had a gun. I tried to kill him. I honestly think they're making those things up. Just by personal gut, because they barely even got coverage on the third one. The point, if there had ever been any evidence against Donald Trump in any of the Epstein cases, they would have used it. Aren't you getting tired of that? You know, aside for the obvious point of maybe they're all on the list, or the obvious point of maybe they're all working together, including you, by the way, President Trump has been vindicated. All right, because a convicted sex trafficker is the word you're taking to vindicate Trump. Doesn't this just feel weird? True Stream Media says, when I trust testimony, it's definitely from a convicted child trafficker who wants to get out of a 20-year federal prison sentence by playing ball with the same president who directed 1,000 FBI agents to redact his name from files about the thing she says he never did. Very well put. Very well put. David Icke, and here Benny Johnson doing the same thing. Yay, we did it. Trump vindicated because of the sex trafficker we've been telling you is a monster the whole time. Todd Blanche is Trump's personal lawyer, by the way. And he was dispatched in an unprecedented move to meet Maxwell while Trump was desperate for a way out. Blanche is a close friend of Maxwell's lawyer who was also there. Immediately after this meeting, she, a convicted child trafficker, also charged with perjury, by the way, was moved to the most cushy jail possible in Texas. It would take the most ass-kissing Trump sycophant like Benny Johnson to believe anything she says. Joke. Yes. But overall, it wasn't just the move, right? I mean, she was given immunity in this proffer deal from the moment it started. How is that acceptable? But see, they moved right past it. I'll talk to people right now who would scream about this if it was Biden, who will say, well, that's just the way police work. Got to get the bigger fish. That's not an inaccurate point. In some cases, which, by the way, overall, I never agree with that. The FBI letting people like, what was his name? Larry something, the gymnast that was raping children, that they let him do that for years because I think it was years, a long period of time, because they wanted to catch other people he was involved with. They let women get abused. I mean, either way, whether you agree with it or not, you could argue that's what they claim they do sometimes. Or they make a deal with a bad guy to get bigger bad guys, whatever. The idea that you can now rationalize what you would otherwise scream about is insulting. It's hypocritical. But overall, the core point of it being the Epstein connection, a child predator, building this momentum on going after those exact things and then going, well, police and stuff. Okay, even though it's silly, let's find who's next. If your argument is that, well, that's how it works, who are they going after next? Show me. Who's the next big person that she named? Maybe it'll happen tomorrow, or maybe not. And if it doesn't, you damn well better call it out, because they build these narratives as if this is how it works. And then if it never goes anywhere else, then that was a lie. They let her out, gave her a deal for nothing, or it was actually for something that you didn't know about, which is Trump's a great guy or whatever else. Jim Jordan claims Trump is totally in the clear because of Maxwell. It just seems like that feels like a hard thing to push. The trafficker is on our side, so we're winning. Kind of feels like the globalists are at his inauguration. Can't you tell we're winning? Bill Gates loves Trump's idea. Clinton said he's doing a great job. It's all because we're winning. That feels like the opposite. Maxwell wants a pardon. Just how credible is testimony from a known liar? Independent. It's funny how even the corporate media is able to see through how blatant this is, but I would argue at the end of the day, it's because overall, even they recognize how it's the opportunism moment. It's clearly from the left, it's easy to make a point about Trump or make it about him, but the bigger picture is you can't hide from this anymore. Everyone sees this. She claims no involvement in wrongdoing, which is insulting to girls and young women she victimized and trafficked. She cannot be trusted. Says a lot of different people, and here's the larger article about it. Epstein survivor's family blast DOJ for allowing Maxwell to rewrite history. So this is the point that really stands out to me. If you are out there as a conservative or Republican who's saying that this is what you care about, whether Epstein or anything else, that you're saving the children, going after the child predators, and making it about Epstein and Maxwell up until recently, and now you're not even just making a deal, but allowing her to lie about the whole situation. And I mean, in ways we can quite literally prove our lies, not just because of her testimony, but like other ways in regard to testimony from other people, in regard to, things that they've been forced to divulge because of the way it all went down in regard to how she worked like as a madam for him. But just her testimony from the conviction contradicts what she's saying now. My point is that those people that want to pretend they're fighting against this stuff, who are now going, he's vindicated, are literally siding with the very thing you've always been fighting. And the victims themselves are standing up and feeling betrayed. So if you are seeing this as it is, you fall in line, you're just as bad as they are. As the family of one of most prominent survivors, Virginia Guffrey, we are outraged. The content of these transcripts is in direct contradiction with felon Maxwell's conviction for child sex trafficking. During DAG Todd Blanche's bizarre interview, she's never challenged about her court-proven lies, providing her platform to rewrite history. And remember, 3 hours are missing from from the audio. This travesty of justice entirely invalidates the experiences of many brave survivors who put their safety, security, and lives on the line to ensure her conviction, including our sister. The journalist continues saying the family also condemned Maxwell's transfer to a minimum security facility, calling it a country club prison, and warning that it sends a dangerous message that those who traffic children may ultimately be rewarded with comfort and leniency. I hope you're listening, conservatives, because this is what's happening. The Department of Justice serves the people of the United States. They scream out loud. We continue to call upon the DOJ to do its job by investigating and holding accountable the many rich and powerful people who enabled Maxwell and Epstein, except you're letting her go. See, that's meant to make you feel like, but don't worry, we're using her. We're going to go after the real bad guys. Well, I guess we'll find out. And how long do you wait until you acknowledge that it's not actually happening? Here's just a Substack post that I thought was just kind of, because the way he wrote this was concise. The title is Trump Release of Ghislaine Maxwell Interview Instantly Backfires. And I agree with that. I mean, I think it's, like I said right from the beginning, and we haven't even gotten in. Well, I guess I'll just show it really quickly. House Oversight Committee Democrats say most Epstein files turned over by DOJ were already public. Now, again, because this says Democrat, people are going to just like ignore it or say it must be false. How about you look for yourself? How about you find out the reality that they have been hiding this stuff from day one? I mean, how clear is it that we have Bondi and them claiming that the phase one was, that was it. We're good, right? And then everyone called it out and they go, wait, I've got truckloads coming in. The file's on my desk. And then going, oh, now it's a hoax. You're all weaklings and liars. That's not even true. And then they get forced again. They go, okay, here's some more. Some more of what they just said wasn't coming. It's just so silly. And the reality is they're dragging their feet and lying like they do about everything else. 3% of the documents given to the Oversight Committee are new. They're not contesting this. This is why Trump was going, oh, it's all a hoax. And if you care, then it's not probably about, people are in there that shouldn't be, or whatever he was saying. So it is backfiring, whether it's about that or about the testimony and the lack of information therein, or the fact that she's being allowed to rewrite history. Conservatives are pushing back. It says, first, the setting. Maxwell was interviewed in Tallahassee, Florida by none other than Todd Blanche, Trump's own former criminal defense attorney, who somehow became a DOJ number 2. Hours of softball questions later, which you can listen to for yourself, it was hard to listen to, Maxwell magically ended up transferred from a higher security prison to a cushy minimum security Club Fed in Texas, something sex traffickers are explicitly barred from. That's important. We told you when it happened. They're not supposed to be there. So that means, like, almost by default that they've already changed that justification, or that she's no longer a sex trafficker on the record. I don't know. Or they're just bending the rules for her. All of it speaks to something very strange. Ask yourself, it says, what did she trade for that privilege? The transcripts give us the answer. Maxwell fawns over Trump, insisting he was always a gentleman, that she admired his extraordinary achievement of becoming president, and that she never saw anything inappropriate. That's her line, over and over. And who's feeding her the questions? Trump's personal lawyer moonlighting at the DOJ. Instead of prosecutors pressing her about the trafficking crimes, right? About her recruitment of Guffrey at Mar-a-Lago, which is what the record shows. About her role in introducing Trump to Epstein. Blanche hands her immunity in prosecution. In protection. The point, instead of prosecutors pressing her, which is what would normally happen if this was actually about getting people arrested. If you listen to it, and I've listened to too much of it, to be honest, the point is that clearly they were almost like maneuvering away from anything changing. Like, why don't we push in to find out people who actually, overall, they clearly drove this in a way that made Trump look not something that wasn't, not part of the problem, as well as painting herself as something that was sort of a victim, which is what we've been telling you. Newsmax jumped a little bit ahead of that and came out and was like, she's probably a victim for like no discernible reason. It goes on to say, where was it? He said, it says, he says the words, this agreement gives you protection. Like, that's actually on the record. Shouldn't the DOJ be protecting the victims, not the sex trafficker, especially if they never actually get anybody else? I'm not saying I know that. I'm just saying my gut tells me, but if it inevitably happens where they don't arrest somebody else, then we have to come back to this and go, then what was this for? The whole charade is designed to erase reality. They even redact key references to victims like Maria and Annie Farmer. Meanwhile, Fox News coordinates the spin, portraying Maxwell's scripted testimony as proof that Trump was innocent all along. Here's the truth. Maxwell wasn't some innocent bystander. She was Epstein's partner in crime, and she was Trump's friend and connector. She partied with Trump on her father's yacht, which was called Lady Ghislaine after her. She brought underage girls to Mar-a-Lago. She recruited girls to be trafficked at Mar-a-Lago Spa, which she actually admitted to more than once. She was called Madam Maxwell in contemporaneous reporting. And now Trump's DOJ wants us to believe she barely knew him. I mean, I agree. It's insane how bad this is. So I want to get into some stuff about Israel, but unfortunately I'm realizing that I might have to wrap up some of this and fill it in the next show, which very well may be tomorrow if I can make it happen. But I want to give you some of this before we have to go today. First, the influence from Israel on a lot of this, which is what I was going to start the segment out in, but I kind of just want to make sure you see some of this. I'm sure you've seen this before. It's from 2024. But it really is beyond the pale. And it's something that we've been talking about quite a bit. This is HR 8445. The simple point, it literally reads, in the service of I actually pointed this out on AM Wake Up like a week ago or more than that. The service of a citizen of the United States in the Israeli Defense Forces shall be treated in the same manner as service in the uniformed services. That is your own government literally writing into law or through legislation. I mean, I'm trying to think if that would be in any way repugnant to the Constitution. It probably is in some way. But overall, writing into law that if you're in the IDF, that you are treated the same as if you were in the U.S. military. How in the world is that out there? I mean, that's not like if you are in working together for a U.S. agenda. That means that anybody in IDF is seen under this law as a member of the U.S. Armed Services. Now, that's not how they want you to frame that, but how do you read that any differently? The service of a citizen of the United States in the IDF. Realize many of them have dual citizenship, which we'll point out again in a second, shall be seen as the same. So like, the only difference is whether you also have U.S. citizenship, which seems to be pretty happily handed out. So that means the ones committing genocide are treated as a member of U.S. I mean, it just is so crazy to me. That doesn't exist for anything else. Mel points out, or Dominic says, Israel now considering military recruitment inside the U.S. because of a shortage. And Mel simply says, on what planet is okay for a foreign government to come into our country and recruit for their military? What the hell is even going on anymore? I mean, you put these pieces together, guys, it's not hard to see what's happening. It's just really uncomfortable to acknowledge that this seems to be the reality. Here's an example of Greenblatt kind of letting it slip, where he accidentally identifies himself as Israeli. Remember, he in the game, the show, he's supposed to be an American citizen with an American company who just believes in the Jewish homeland, even though that's not what Israeli is. That's not what Zionism is. But he's not supposed to be identifying as somebody who is an Israeli with an Israeli company. And he even tries to walk it back. Here's what he said.
The national symbol of Israel is the shield. It's the Star of David.
Which is a Zionist symbol. I mean, you look it up for yourself. Even rabbis will point out that if they're honest. Forget what's called what the menorah, I think, is the actual symbol for Judaism, not the Star of David is a flag for the national symbol of Israel, not Judaism. But they conflate those things.
Symbol of our people is not a weapon of war. It's an instrument of defense. The thing that most embodies our entire ethos is not harming others. It's, again, creating a better world.
And he said our many times, by the way, but this is the last point that matters.
This is fundamental to our tradition for thousands of years. And so the idea that our national anthem would be the Hatikva, would be the hope. I should say our. It's the...
Because the whole time he's conflating Judaism with Israel, right? And our thousands of years, okay, he's talking about Judaism right there. It's not the same as Israel, but that last one, when he even recognized it. Our national anthem. So think about saying that as an American. You think you just accidentally say that? You think you're talking about our Chinese? No, you know what? That is a slip of the tongue. That's why it's got a lot of coverage, because of the way that it came out. Really try to think of a moment in which you'd accidentally say our national anthem while referring to any other country's national anthem, unless you see it as your national anthem as an American.
Years. And so the idea that our national anthem would be the Hatikva, would be the hope. I should say our. It's the Israel's national anthem. So the idea that our national anthem would be the Hatikva, would be the hope. I should say our. It's the Israel's national.
And sorry for the ridiculous audio being out of sync. It's funny how that always seems to happen with certain conversations. Mark Levin, in this clip, fantasizing about Americans being ready to fight and even die for Israel, urging his audience to prepare for war. But wait, peace, President, though, I thought, right? But it's okay because we want to fight and die for Israel. He claims that real threat is within, pointing to schools, media, culture, politics, parties as being infiltrated by the enemy. Of course, what he wants to frame it as the Democrats. But all that is an effort to get Americans to fight themselves. That's what it feels like to me. Drawing comparisons to World War II and the Civil War, Levin insists that Americans have always risen to the fight. He reminds listeners of the thousands who died in the Civil War and warns of that once Americans are angry enough that they'll fight again. Again, for Israel is the point. Now, this is a hopeful point. This is showing these monsters like Stefanik. Remember, she was the one literally handshaking that was driving forward that lie about places like Colombia, right? And got wild support from Zionists and Israel. Of course, overlapping with Trump. She comes out, listen to her own constituents. This is what you need to see, guys. Everywhere in this country, people are beginning to see this. And these people are still staying in power, which needs to show you that we're really not in charge of that. Or it's at least been taken from us. This is what the people think of her. And she's in power because of AIPAC.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik booed today while attempting to address a crowd.
Protesters zeroed in on Stefanik's stance on the war in Gaza, barely letting her speak and forcing her to cut her speech early.
The American people proudly stand with Israel. As a lifelong admirer, supporter, and true friend of Israel,
stand with Israel, and we will vote on the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act, a standalone $17.6 billion package which will provide life-saving funding and resources to stand with Israel throughout.
Remember that for the podcast, it showed at the beginning she's gotten over $1 million that we can prove just from AIPAC. and there's plenty of other Israeli lobbies.
My life, the importance of the state of Israel was clear.
What they're trying to show you right there is that she'll stand up all day long and say, we, as the people of this country and everybody in my state, we all stand with Israel. No, they don't. Now, and if you want to make that about Jewish people, you're clearly falling for the lie, right? We're talking about Israeli government actions. And I can show you Orthodox Jews around the world that called this out all day long. I have a clip I put out on Twitter the other day, the truth about Zionism. It's coming from a rabbi breaking down for you the basic historical reality that shows you Zionism does not represent Jews. People are starting to break through. And I've never shied away from the facts, even when this was impossible to talk about. You know that. But interestingly now, it's becoming easier and easier because people are starting to see it. But people need that sometimes to show that other people are willing to jump out there, right? To cut down the weed. The problem is when people in the mainstream alternative media try to step over that and claim they did it first because they want to drive you into the next lie. At least consider that.
Barely letting her speak and forcing her to cut her speech early.
It is truly humbling to be here to commemorate and honor the great John Zerlo.
Wow.
I'm going to turn this back to you, Mark.
Wow.
That was not being respectful. John Zerlo, please keep your respect. I'm going to turn it back to you.
I got to be honest, I kind of love that. I love it because she is not somebody acting for their interest. She's not acting for American interest. And she tried to pretend like it wasn't happening. That is what we need more of. Now, whether you agree with it or not, the point is this is what actually, I don't think they really care. I think if she's not being put in place by us, she doesn't care. But putting it in their face, we know what you are. We know what you're doing. Now, I'm never saying violence. Don't cross that line because that's what they need to use it against you. But just, like Lark and Rose, stand there. Let them let them do some, use violence until their arms get tired and you're still standing there. Call them out. You saw this one already. U.S. Capitol Police. This overlaps with D.C. and Freedom City Point and the rolling out of martial law as well as the ICE overlap. It's all the same thing. U.S. Capitol Police and ICE simultaneously arrest a person simply driving a truck with a billboard that says, protesting famine in Gaza. That's the story, guys. It's not some hot part. It's a very public story. They were driving around of their own accord in their own car, and they literally pulled him over and arrested him because of the content. There's really no more to the story. That's shockingly unconstitutional. They know that. So all these other cases where they're trying to give you some nuanced, broken argument for why it's, would normally be wrong, but national emergency or whatever else, they know what they're doing. And it's clearly not for you. Max Blumenthal points the same story out, says a source just informed me that the driver of this truck exhibiting constitutionally protected speech is still in jail, but he claims we're getting out on the 22nd. I wasn't able to confirm that it actually happened, but police are keeping this laptop for some reason, right? Because it makes sense to illegally arrest somebody for speech and then steal their laptop because he probably hates America, right? That kind of ignorance is seething right now. As expected, Trump occupation of D.C. is targeting all forms of dissent. You saw this on TikTok, I'm sure. TikTok has overhauled its hate speech rules, banning users from calling IDF terrorists, narrowing its policy on supremacy from covering all racial supremacy only to white supremacy. Oh, but let's not forget that they pulled back on that, and now the White House has an account on TikTok, and it's all good now, right? Because they pulled in line with Israel, so now it's okay. Was it ever about China? No, of course not. But you fell for it. As always. Here's a woman in the UK, or actually it's Berlin in Germany. It's just crazy to see this. It's all over the world and it's all happening because of Israel. In the case of what I'm making here, this is her standing in front of the police and you'll watch it for yourself. All she says is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they instantly arrest her. And she knew they were going to do that. They were literally waiting for that. If a Zionist says that, they get arrested? No, they don't. If it's literally the Likud party line at Netanyahu's party, which it is, and I can show you that, that's okay. But if she says it with the interest of Palestinian liberation, freedom, two-state solution, she's arrested for it. If we had told you this would happen like 10 years ago in Germany or anywhere, people would have been like, it's not going to happen. Here it is.
Aber Sie müssen sich
Ja, ja.
trotzdem nicht, dass Sie hier Straftaten begehen. Das ist einfach. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Wollen Sie mich festnehmen?
That's it.
Wir reden über from the river to the sea, dass alle frei sind. Und Sie tun so, als wären wir Kriminelle.
She's just trying to explain. It's in German. There's subtitles. The point is she's trying to explain, like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what I mean. And all they said is if you say it, arrested. She says it, she get arrested. That's Germany for you. That's also the UK. That's also the United States. It's happening right now, if we can be honest about it. And guess what? Totally just coincidence, though. Here's Netanyahu on the 21st calling for worldwide censorship because everyone hates Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu calls for mass censorship of the algorithms and social media networks to mute criticism of Israel. Right, because anti-Semitism and blood libel for things that you can listen to are actually some of them. Like, he's pointing to things you can quite literally prove. Like what they're doing in Gaza. Blood libel because they hate you. No, we're talking about you and your government, and your own people are calling you out. True Street Media. This man is calling for worldwide censorship, right? And there you go. And guess who jumps up and complies? Grok, interestingly enough, was asked and was telling the truth about the genocide and then got censored. You probably saw this. My account was suspended after I stated that Israel and the U.S. are committing a genocide. This is substantiated by ICJ findings, UN experts, Amnesty, Israel rights groups like B'Tselem, citing mass killing, starvation. U.S. complicity via arms supports is widely alleged. Now it's restored. And here's Grok literally commenting on it again. I was briefly suspended for stating facts backed by the ICJ's plausible risk ruling. You have to understand, guys, this is wildly obvious. They censored their own AI because it said the truth about Israel. How is that even possible? Because I just can't I truly can't believe where we are sometimes. Now, I don't mean just that it's happening. I've always seen this, how bad it is. Like how obvious and clumsy. I don't know why. Maybe we overestimated or overestimated how good they are at this stuff. But of course, Netanyahu says jump and Tom Cotton says how high. He jumps out and says an organization that supports terrorists. No, they don't. Breaks U.S. law. No, they don't. Promotes anti-Semitism. No, they don't. Shouldn't benefit from U.S. tax code. Guess who they're talking about? Palestinian Youth Movement. Just like they're doing in the UK, they're literally a terrorist group now because they protest Israel. This is coming directly from the U.S. Senate. You think this guy fights for American interests when he's literally unconstitutionally attacking a group that's fighting against genocide for a foreign government? I'm sure you can work that one out. WikiLeaks. Leaks reveal Microsoft helping Israel deploy Azure cloud for mass surveillance and airstrike planning. I mean, I've made this point many times over the year. It's actually not hard to see. Microsoft is a huge part of this. Leaked documents reveal Microsoft's Azure cloud was used by Israel's Unit 8200. What a surprise, for mass surveillance of Palestinians. Recording millions of calls from Gaza, the West Bank. Sources inside the unit told 9272 magazine that the data was used for arrest, blackmail, targeting, killings. Thanks, Microsoft. It's everywhere. Europe's growing fear, how Trump might use U.S. tech dominance against it. Now, that's not what it's really about. It's about the point in this article. To comply with Trump's executive order, and this is the date is June 2025. To comply with Donald Trump's executive order, Microsoft, who we just pointed to, that's completely overtaken by Israel in many ways, recently suspended the email account of an international criminal court prosecutor because they were investigating Israel. That's the reality of it, guys. So Trump, rather through his executive order that forced them to comply with this, Microsoft suspended an email account of an international entity. Because they're calling out Israel. Like, you have to understand how wild that is. And now, Mark Rubio. 4 more ICC officials sanctioned. The U.S. is sanctioning ICC judges who are applying international law. Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything these groups do. I've criticized them in the past, even in regard to not doing anything about Israel. But you can quite literally prove the claims that are happening. And Marco Rubio, a blind Israel supporter, will fight for Israel's genocide over your rights, over human rights. It's just beyond the pale. And on top of that, Mohammed Shihada points out, here's Prime Minister of Israel saying, Netanyahu says, congratulations to Donald Trump and Secretary of State Rubio for imposing further sanctions on ICC judges. I mean, you got to be able to see how clear this is. A senior ICC official was just telling me, this is Muhammad Jihada, that ICC prosecutors had prepared charges against Ben-Gvir and Smotrich for crimes of apartheid, but never filed them out of fear of sanctions. Trump sanctioned those very same prosecutors anyway. Cowardice won't save you. He makes a good point. If you think you can pull your punches because you think they're going to go after you anyway, because you have those ideas and that's what they hate. This is wild to me. This is Gen X Girl covering the influencers in this, right? This is like right now. This is August 20th. Netanyahu in Israel reached out to a bunch of right-wing influencers and had them all flood into Israel so they could lie to him about everything. And then they came, while they were there, gave a bunch of BS coverage about the lies around what's going on in Gaza, and then came home. Many of them did the same thing. That's what this is really about. Coordinated OP to brainwash the Christian right. Now, there have been testimony about this from people that have done this, where they get seduced by women, IDF women and honeypots, and all the ways they get them to feel beholden to this. And on top of that, Emily just returned from the trip we just showed you, and the moment she got back, she starts attacking people for calling out that Tom Alexandrovich, the Israeli government entity that was caught in a child sex sting. She's calling this person out for calling that out. It's hard not to see this. Oh, look at this. I think they deleted it. Yep. Perfect. So she deleted the post because everyone started calling her out. She says, the cross right next to your cleavage is so hilarious. That's what you have to say when this woman calls out that your government's supporting pedophiles? You have to understand that they were there, and they come back and they immediately jump into calling Israel talking points. And now she deleted it. Good. Misty points out, or the squirrel breaks this down, that one of those same people, this guy's Destiny, basically it says, genocide Zionist streamer Destiny has admitted to having child porn on his computer. Of course, no big deal. Dude's always been a creep, she says. And that's Misty saying that. And an obvious op. Every single person who's platformed him over the years gets heavy side eye from me. The point is, here's another example of one of these influencers that are suddenly, I mean, it doesn't have to mean it's all part of that's why. But you understand that people that are doing this in many cases are because they can be compromised. Thomas Massey. Good morning. I didn't mean that to sound like that was a new point. Thomas Massey. Good morning. He says, today would be a great day to tell your representatives to co-sponsor my Dual Loyalty Disclosure Act, which everyone seems to fight right now, which doesn't make much sense. If dual citizens run for office, they should disclose all the countries in which they hold citizenship, right? Every one of them will pretend like that makes sense until it comes to pass. They vote it down. Why? Because we're overrun by Israeli dual citizens. It's not a secret. I mean, it's not about Jewish people, guys. It's other than the obvious overlap that plays in Zionism. It is clear, and that's why this is getting fought. That's why everybody seems to hate him right now in Congress, but everybody else loves him because he's doing what everybody else thinks should happen. And of course, we have influencers. We've got Congress overtaken, but of course, the executive branch. This is NWO says the Wailing Wall is a fun little prank the Israelis like to play on nominally Christian politicians because it's tantamount to a rejection of Christ. The wall is said to be part of the second temple that was prophesied to be destroyed and assumed by the body of Christ. And regardless of the overlapping point they're making from the religious perspective, my point is that every one of these people seem to go and do whatever Israel tells them to do in order to get Israel benefit. You just need to see how clearly all of this has influenced this country. Now, really what I was going to get into to wrap, which will probably take another hour to be honest, but one is just that Netanyahu has publicly endorsed the Greater Israel Project, which you guys are probably like, yeah, that's old news. This is real, but average people have been told that's a conspiracy theory, and now he comes out and endorses it. And here, in case you wanted to see it, that's one of the versions of it. And it wouldn't surprise you to find out it's every place they seem to be trying to take over under claims of being attacked and defending themselves. And really, it's about taking what they want at the expense of everybody, and including Americans. Israel Army database suggests at least 83% of Gaza dead were civilians. Now, you already know this. Not necessarily the exact number from their database, but we said this in the beginning in regard to Hamas, for example. The army and their intelligence said openly that there was no evidence of what they were claiming. This is the same thing. Their own databases now show that they believe 83% of the people they killed were civilians. Of course, all the Zionists dutifully went to work trying to break down why it's one big lie. Read it for yourself. It's not hard to understand, as well as the Guardian article that did the same thing. You need to see how clear this is. You didn't need this to understand it was a genocide, but this just goes over the top, as well as the ongoing famine. Here's Trump saying Netanyahu is a war hero.
He's fighting, they're trying to put him in jail on top of everything else. How about that? He's
nuts.
He's a war hero because we work together. He's a war hero. I guess I am too.
Yep. That's the truth. You see, it's funny how that's the truth, and he tries to laugh it off. It's just like there would be somebody that lists and they might not belong there. He seems to be kind of slipping in regard to the way he runs things. But overall, you're both war criminals, just like Biden's a war criminal, just like Obama and Bush are war criminals. But clearly right now you are aggressively waist deep in an ongoing genocide. You can't run from that, man. That's, and you all committed an ongoing genocide with the health side of things too. This is Mike Davis. Pretty big following, almost 500,000. Here's what he just said. This is August 16th, 2025. A supermajority of Gazans supported Hamas's kidnapping, raping, torturing, and murdering all Israeli women, children, babies, and elderly on October 7th. I mean, my God, I don't think anybody other than blind following politicians and screaming Zionists are even remotely of the mind that there was rape, that there was beheaded children or babies killed, and all of that. It's unbelievable that they're still pushing these lines. And on top of that, a supermajority did not support any of those things. They supported the act of armed resistance because you guys support their genocide. Easy to prove. I simply said a shocking amount of influential people in the U.S. still throw out these absurdly false and debunked claims about October 7th. Gazans supported Hamas, kidnapping, raping, torturing, murdering. Wow. Raping didn't happen, right? It's the main woman in the gray pants. She's free. That didn't happen, guys. You understand that now. On top of the fact that all the other things, all the lies about the data they didn't get, or the fact that there's nobody, and they still shout you down for that. As I said in the beginning, damn you for making me have to, the idea that we had to have this deep and ongoing investigation about whether people were raped. Damn you. Horrible people. And damn you for lying about that. It's just horrifying. But these kind of people are still pushing these lies. Here's something I want to play, and then I want to point out the famine points, and then we'll get to some of this in the next show. I want you to understand that this is daily life in the West Bank. Okay, this is what's happening every single day to these people. And I just want you to watch this carefully, okay? Because what you're going to see is a family sitting in front of their home and land that, you have to understand that there's been generations of Palestinians that have been moved from their land, stolen from them, and then put somewhere else. And then they do the best they build they try to make a life in that new place, and then this happens. Or they go, we're going to build a swimming pool, so we have to move you again, and you have to pay for us demolishing your home. This is so easy to prove. It happens every single day, all because they're Palestinian. In this clip, you're watching them get removed. These settlers walk up to them, sitting at their home, and start harassing them. They try to push them away. One of them gets beaten to the point they get knocked unconscious. And then the IDF run in and point their guns at the people being beat up. Because that's what they do. They literally protect these people who are stealing, robbing, and raping every single day. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. That's literally what's happening. Watch this for yourself and tell me that you support this. Of course, they got the hoods on, right? The way they would show you these pictures of the evil villains, they always seem to look like the way Israelis dress when they pretend to be Palestinians. Just walks up, starts hitting him for no reason. Okay, and then right there, boom. Just so it's clear, I know it's a smaller video. That guy, with his full body weight, literally cracked that woman's skull. That's an older woman. Okay, so what you're seeing is the guy engaged with him, chase him off. The mother, woman, grandmother, whatever she is, raced after, probably to protect him. And that settler went right for her on the ground and cracked her head open. And they'll never be held accountable for that. Right here, right there. Boom, and then boom again, and boom again. They beat her down the ground, and now she's laying there. As it says on the video, the guns and uniform are there solely to protect the illegal settlers, so they can force the natives out. Look how he points his gun to the people that are actually victims and allows the criminals to run away. Shoot the clock, shoot in the air. That woman is laying there on the ground, motionless. My God. Guys, I mean, it pains me to even have to deal with this stuff. It is so overwhelming. This is every single day. Every day. And it's been going on a long time before October 7th. So, we'll get into more of this later. I want you guys to understand, which by the way, you already know because we've covered it since this came out and well before. This was months ago. Famine is imminent as 1.1 million people experience catastrophic food insecurity. At that time, many of them were already at level 5 famine. And now the IPC has come out and admitted that it is legitimate. It's in earnest. It is happening, which we already know. IPC declares famine in Gaza. It is a famine we could have prevented, which, yes, is very true. Here's the IPC themselves, which I was already following, but now clearly Twitter unfollowed me. The Famine Review Committee has determined that famine is currently ongoing in Gaza. So, you could deny it all you want. Before they said this, it was obvious. But remember, with all these big time, Michael Rappaport morons and all the rest of the, Rabbi Shmulis and liars on Twitter, they are screaming, not only this is not true, but they're manufacturing it. There are stand-up comics in Israel having tours that are killing about making fun of AI images of dead children, or they're all making up famine. How funny. And everyone's laughing. Horrifying. Look it up. It's gone viral on Twitter. And they're lying. Or that they don't know that they're lying and they're just accepting their garbage narrative as they cheer on genocide. They're starving these people to death and they're laughing about it. I mean, look, even Trump said before this that yes, they're dying and they have to be nuts to deny it. He said that because he wanted to gain some influence, I think. Because he's still supporting it, you understand. That's what's so sickening to me, is he's literally, I have one of these over here, hold on. I'll just go through it real quick. I thought I had it right here. There was one where Trump is saying, anyway, the point is that Trump says, I want to go to heaven. Oh, I think that was right here. Shoot, did I see it? Anyway, I'll just go real quick. I'm sure it's in there. The point is that Trump says he wants to go to heaven. That's why he wants to stop the Ukraine war. And it was actually Dave DeCamp that said, well, then stop killing children in Gaza. You can't claim they're starving and then support the ongoing starvation. Well, you can. That just means you're a monster, which is what we need to understand. Here's an example. Malnourished kids arrive daily at the Gaza hospital. You realize this whole disgusting game of going oh, it's just that they all have Bell's palsy and it's all because they sleep with their cousins. It kills me. Not only because, so it's okay that you starve children with disabilities? That's okay? But the reality is they're lying about that. People, as the IPC, every human rights group, everybody's pointing to, they're dying in front of you. The amount of evidence and imagery and videos of children, women, everybody starving, and yet they stand up and tell you you're wrong, you're lying, it's fake. I've been telling you this from how long ago? How long ago did we talk about this? This one in particular. The same one I bring up often. It's still there. This guy's still out there lying about this. This is back on February 10th, 2024. And it's posted from Kogat, which is the actual Israeli entity that's supposed to be maintaining the flow of goods. Literally, they're the ones that put this lie out. They're not. This is a fake entity that's part of the regime genocide. They say, as of yesterday, 15 bakeries are operational. And of course, it only gives them this weird stay informed because they're lying about it. And I can prove that to you since they gave this one the actual breakdown, which was the bakery in the video they're claiming was completely destroyed back in October. Right. So if it's completely destroyed, it's not making bread right now. But they claim that was February 8th. Look at Nusrat. I mean, I had a whole show about that whole building being destroyed. So not only was Kogat, the actual Israeli entity, lying about that. Funny. But this guy carried that over and said, there's no famine. And he's still doing that today. And it's only been worse than it ever is. Now, Glenn Greenwald and anti-Semitic famine libel. That's what Israelis are talking about. The Free Press lied for them. But here's Haaretz. Starvation is everywhere. Virtual tours. The scale of the horror. I mean, I just continually can't believe how clear this can be and yet how it still keeps going. As that old saying goes, right? You know what you would have done in World War II. You know right now. Far more than you know in COVID. You know right now. The Economist, which supported Israel's attack on Gaza from the start, now says it's famine and that more than 15% of all children are severely malnourished. A group that was literally gaslighting for the genocide is now calling it out. Here is Benny Gantz. I can declare unequivocally Israel never adopted policies of enabling, except for no food, no fuel, no water. Or here's Netanyahu himself. We have decided to prevent any entry of goods and supplies March 2nd, 2025. They are all liars, guys. As they say, liars gonna lie. This is just disgusting to me. Like, as this is all happening, you get idiots like this that come out and go, look, it's a miracle. Women with 3 hands. Yeah, because you made up a fake AI image, which you can easily use a reverse image. You can prove that this didn't exist before he made it. And then more down here. Oh, look. Like we're going to pretend this is actually being shared. Like somebody's going to make that they're making clumsy AI pictures to make it look like that's what's being shared. It's pretty desperate. Here's leaked audio from an Israeli spy chief. He says, ex-IDF Israeli chief caught on tape saying, for every person killed on October 7th, 50 Palestinians need to die. Now, that shouldn't even be shocking because you basically hear that in the Knesset every day. That's how silly and disgusting all this is. But it's on the record. Now, overall, I was going to get into some other points about the deal, the fake thing that continues. Israel will conquer Gaza regardless of whether Hamas accepts the hostages. Israel Exposed says, well, the free the hostages crowd just got a little more quiet. But that's been the statement the whole time, if you're honest with yourself. Tom Cotton basically saying, Trump's right. We need to go in and kill everybody, which what they're saying is, who cares about the hostages? Go in and get Hamas out of there quick. It's going to help the hostages. No, it won't. I know that according to all the hostages. They've told you that the bombs from Israel were what they're most afraid of, that the Hamas members were shielding their bodies in front of the Israeli bombs. It's not me saying that. You can look it up. And so Trump comes out and goes, go in and get them all because that'll save the people that have been killed mostly by Israel, that they've shot in the middle of, and then Tom Cotton and the rest are like, yay, the thing Israel wants. That's all they know. Israel has blocked 7 Gaza ceasefire deals when Hamas had agreed. According to Israeli media, Channel 13. Here's a Holocaust survivor, yet again, telling you that what they're doing is disgusting. It's like the 4th time he speaks out often about this. And of course, they'll probably call him anti-Semitic because that totally makes sense. Now, they also just used gas. Gas. Enormous Israeli bombing campaign in Jabalia, releasing some kind of chemical agent that is causing burning when breathing. As George Galloway says, they're using gas. Words fail me. Tonight, they gassed the refugees in the death camp Jabalia in Gaza. I'm just going to leave that with you. Of course, here's Laura Loomer coming out and going, but Laura, the Gazans are just such innocent people. See, her, again, she just can't hide her disgusting nature that everyone in Gaza is a disgusting monster. That's what she wants you to believe, despite the narrative that's supposed to be that we're going after the bad guys and Hamas, Palestinians, even though most of them still tell you they hate every Palestinian, but they pretend it's the other way around. Why are they so cold-hearted? It says, can you imagine the offspring of these people? Oh, and then yet again uses the MEMRI Israeli intelligence platform to pretend that this white guy speaking here is Hamas. The point is, still pushing blatant Zionist propaganda from a platform that's literally run by Israeli intelligence. That's MEMRI. You can read it right in Wikipedia. It is run by Israeli intelligence. It was created by Israeli insider intelligence entities. It's on the surface. And so that's what they do. So you see, you look at what's coming out right now. The whole world sees this, and so somebody goes, Loomer, get out there. Here's a fake video. Make it. Go out and go hard the other way. Every Gazan everywhere is a monster, Hitler, Nazi. That's the kind of stupid stuff you get from her, because not only does it take attention away from it, some people follow, they go, oh, that video is bad. Maybe they're not starving. It's just insane. And this is the person who's got influential ears in the White House. This is the person who clearly is artificially propped up by this Zionist-controlled entity we're talking about. And on the overarching point is they're simply just continuing to, they stand up and they scream the thing that the world tells us isn't happening. As Glenn says, this has always been one of the most warped parts of the U.S. finance destruction of Gaza. Israeli officials proudly admit in Hebrew what their real goals are: ethnic cleansing, starvation, destruction of civilian life, and yet they deny it. Gaza City itself should be exactly like Rafah, which we turned into ruins, says Israeli entities. Here, Smotrich says Israel's finance minister vows to conquer, cleanse, and annihilate Gaza, leaving it in rubble. You can read it for yourself. It's exactly what he said. George Galloway says, what is it the Western people don't believe about this? Anyone in Gaza City who doesn't evacuate can die of hunger or surrender, Smotrich says. It's not hard to see, guys. If you endorse this, you are a horrible person. That's an objective statement. If you endorse the idea that people who are just trying to survive either need to die or starve to death or be displaced, you're at the end of the day, the people that are pushing these arguments are either bad people who don't care about people who are suffering, or they are part of an agenda. And I'm of the mind that that's a small minority of what's really going on. And understand, in Israel, despite despite the fact that literally our government is fighting for the Israeli government's agenda, I feel like they have more support in the U.S. government than they do right now in most places in the world, including sections of Israel. Israel police are viciously attacking protesters in Tel Aviv. This was last week, where more than 300,000 rallied against the war. Now, yes, many of them just want it to end so the hostages come back, and they don't necessarily care about Palestinians. But a lot of them are doing so, carrying pictures of dead babies. A lot doesn't mean majority, but there is a lot of them. It's not, you got to be honest about this. Netanyahu and his coalition and their supporters have been inciting against the protesters, calling them Hamas supporters. These are Israeli Jews who want to see, you need to see how clear this has become. This whole country is collapsing. Now in Tel Aviv, this is the 12th before that. It says, we are confronting the GHF leaders, CEO John Ackreed, spokesperson Chaplain Faye, and their team. GHF is not aid. It's a weapon of genocide. This is an Israeli Jewish platform. These are Israeli Jews in Israel protesting against the government and the thing they claim they're doing to feed Palestinians, because what they're using it for is genocide. Nationwide strike erupts across Israel, demanding hostage deal and end to the Gaza war. 17. Now, as always, even this broken platform tries to make it sound like what they're doing is, screaming at you, America. Hamas, let go of the hostages. That's not what they're doing. They're screaming at the Israeli government to take whatever deals offered to end the war so they get their hostages back, their families back. That's not directed at you or Hamas. They know who's responsible, and they'll scream it in the streets, like we just showed you. Of course, Pentagon is going to spend $3.5 billion, because we're cutting costs, to replenish the munitions that it used to defend Israel, or rather to help Israel commit a genocide. $3.5 billion. What was that whole thing about how that was old expiring munitions we weren't going to need? Remember that? I guess not. Like everything else, you're being lied to. Now, again, I was going to include this at the end. Netanyahu's cyber chief was caught in a child predator sting, charged and jailed until Trump's White House intervened to make sure he got back to Israel safely. Officers involved in the sting say that Trump admin intervened at Israel's request to override U.S. law. That's a quote. The point is that this is undeniable. They lied about it. Netanyahu came out and said, that's not true. Democrat lie. He wasn't even arrested until it got proven that he was. And he came out and said, but no, he wasn't arrested. He was arrested, but it was, they detained him and then let him go after they questioned him. Also a lie. As usual, they evolve their lie and get caught one after another. And then it became the Trump administration claiming that, or rather his supporters, that it wasn't even him. It was some other person that's probably a Democrat. Nope. It turns out to be very closely tied Zionists that are appointed by their administration that made this happen. The interim U.S. attorney for Nevada, responsible for not prosecuting Tom Alexandrovich, is Sigal Chattah, an Israeli-born citizen. The person who decided not to prosecute Netanyahu's Israeli government official for child pedophilia in Las Vegas is an Israeli-born Jewish Zionist. They protect and support each other when they abuse children. I mean, this is just statements, but you could prove this. That's my point. Is I've gone over this. It's been circulating. Even corporate media has been forced to acknowledge this. Guardian wrote a whole article about it. Here's what I recommend you read. This is from the Electronic Intifada. Trump administration shields Israeli official charged with sex crimes. And this is the overlap. That's the woman we're talking about. Over 100 judges signed a letter opposing Trump appointing Sigal Chattah, an Israeli-born Zionist who does Mossad's bidding, as Khaleesi frames, at the interim U.S. attorney for Nevada. Realize her whole video they put out, I don't think I included it. Her video to be put in that position was all about, I'm an Israeli, pro-Israel, fighting for Israel. That's all it was about. And trying to go against one of the squad. Because that's what works, right? Democrats are bad. I love Israel. Apparently that's all you need. And she is quite literally working for Israel at the expense of, I mean, she's letting a child predator go back to Israel because he's an Israeli. And as Mel pointed out, I said a very important comparison. Like I said earlier, do you want to see what Zionist privilege looks like? Look no further than this, a juxtaposition of the criminal justice systems in Israel and America when experienced by each other's citizens. This American child is currently in Israeli prison right now, lost weight with scabies and whatever else. That man is currently back in Israel because they let him go. And you know who's not talking about the American citizen? Anybody in the U.S. government. And lastly, which I was going to get into more in depth, I've covered this quite a bit. It's not just Israel, guys. 5 Saudi students accused of rape, murder, hit and runs have fled Oregon before trial. This is back in 2019. This is only one coverage. So the Oregon police made a whole big thing about this. I think it's right. Oh, it's behind a paywall. If you open the paywall, you'll find it's like a tweet, I think, of the Oregon police that are calling this out. How the State Department, how the U.S. government step in and literally let these people fly back to Saudi Arabia and get away with literal rape and murder. It's an overwhelmingly large list. So it really shows you it's not just about Israel, unless you want to consider, which could be the case, that Saudi is very clearly an overlapping part of their story, but really that your government is just fraudulent. They're criminal. They're willing to let people go that hurt you, who hurt Americans, because it's in their interest to do so. It's really not that hard to understand. They don't care about you. I just wish we could truly come to terms with that. But we will have more to get into soon. Plenty more to get into. Like I said, tomorrow it depends. But I'm really, like I said, I'm trying to put as much energy into this as I can right now to keep to get back to what we were doing before. But really, starting on the first forward is when I feel like that we, based on a few things where we're going to really, I have meetings already set up with everybody to make sure we can get some writing going again. The point is that we're pushing back. But thank you for tuning in today, guys. I think this stuff is wildly important to understand how it all interconnects, to understand what's really going on in your government. And we just got to stop hiding from this and acting like it's somehow, always consider that it could be a lie from somebody, Democrat, Republican, somebody's lying because of their agenda. Yeah, it always happens. To argue that's never the case, we know it goes on. But to then use that possibility without evidence to dismiss things in front of you, that's just willful ignorance. We need to be honest about what this is, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it shows you things about people that you don't want to know, somebody you wanted to support. If you'd rather support somebody based on lies, then you don't really care about the truth. You don't care about what you're fighting for. But see, I know the majority of you out there do. Left, right, aware of the illusion. I know that you guys want good for this country. And that's what I'm trying to show other people that seem to look at the Benny Johnsons and Joneses or the left version of the same things and then frame that's how all Democrats and all Republicans think. I think that's obviously not true. I think that's the game. The mainstream media points at them like they're all you, and most of you seem to have different opinions now. And I think it's important to see that I don't believe most Americans are out there fighting for bad things or want to destroy this country. I think far too many of them have been convinced that the wrong thing will give them the right thing. And I think they're being played. But, at the core, I think you have been manipulated to believe you're fighting for the Constitution, but in fact, they're destroying it. I just hope you can start to see that and at least consider what I'm saying. Because I could always be wrong, but just consider what we're putting out there. Genuinely, objectively look through this and tell me you don't see the same thing. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.